Good evening, everybody. Sorry for being late. We had a meeting before this. Welcome to the Bellevue City Council meeting for March 25th, 2024. Tonight, before we begin, I just want to talk about the festival that starts today. And we had celebrations yesterday in our parks, and we'll have celebrations this weekend in the parks, and that's the Holi Festival. It's the Hindu festival of color, celebrating the end of winter and the welcoming of spring. And it's celebrated every year in India and by people of Indian descent and people not of Indian descent who love to throw color around and celebrate spring. So I just want to wish everybody a happy Holi, and I hope you'll join me at the Crossroads Park on Saturday for a big celebration. City Clerk, would you like to do the roll call?
You, Mayor Robinson,
Here.
Deputy Mayor Malakutian,
Here.
Councilmember Hamilton,
Here.
Councilmember Lee,
Here.
Councilmember Neuenhouse,
Here.
Councilmember Stokes,
Here.
and Councilmember Zahn.
Here. Councilmember Neuenhouse, would you please lead us in the flag salute?
Sir, Mayor, please all rise.
Hold on.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Injustice for all.
We have a proclamation tonight, the Sexual Assault Awareness Month proclamation being read by Deputy Mayor Malakutian.
Thank you, Mayor. Whereas sexual assault is pervasive, every 68 seconds, someone is sexually assaulted in the United States. And Black, Indigenous, and other people of color, people living in poverty, LGBTQ plus people, non-binary people, elders, people with disabilities, and others who have been historically oppressed are disproportionately affected by sexual violence in significant and complex ways. And rape is among the most underreported crimes for reasons that include the victim's fear of being disbelieved or further traumatized. Additional barriers such as language, immigration status, gender bias, and systemic racism contribute further to the silencing of victims. And negative impacts of sexual violence trauma on adults, youth, and children include fear, concern for safety, physical and mental health conditions, including symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder, injury, and missed work or school. And King County is home to many organizations that provide culturally and linguistically specific services for survivors of sexual assault. These services are critical to effectively respond to many survivors' specific needs. And only by working together as a community can we prevent and alleviate the trauma of sexual violence by ensuring supportive resources are available to all, while standing up to attitudes and behaviors that contribute to sexual assault. Now, therefore, I, Mo Malakutian, on behalf of Lynn Robinson, Mayor of the City of Bellevue, Washington, and on behalf of its council, join advocates and communities throughout King County in taking action to prevent sexual violence by standing with survivors and proclaiming April 2024 as Sexual Assault Awareness Month. Together, we commit to a safer future for all children, youths, adults, and families in our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Is there anybody here to accept the proclamation?
I think we have Assistant Chief Andrew Popachuk.
Oh, great. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Council, Mayor, Deputy Mayor. Thank you for bringing this important subject forward and recognizing it in the most public way. Survivors of sexual assault that may be in the community that have never reported it before, I would encourage them to bring that forward to the police department because there are services available. And that is why it's so important to bring it up publicly so that those individuals can go to the police department and we can provide services to them. So I want to say thank you to the entire council for this proclamation.
Thank you. Can we take a picture with you?
Absolutely.
Okay, let's do it. Yeah. Okay, before we approve the agenda I think there is going to be a motion to amend,
Yes. I move to approve the agenda amended to add one item under council business and new initiatives as item 7C to provide direction to staff regarding ethics officer services.
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. City Clerk, do we have anybody signed up for oral communications?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. This evening, we do have 22 on our pre-registration list. We do have a number of folks signed up in support and sharing opposition to Bike Bellevue, so we will only be able to hear from 3 people on each of those sides. So I'll go over a few of the other rules around oral communications. So oral communications is for a period of no more than 30 minutes, and topics must relate to City of Bellevue government. People speaking to items on tonight's agenda will be called first, and then if time remains, people speaking to items not on tonight's agenda will be called. The presiding officer is authorized in both of those categories to give preference to people who have not spoken to council within the last 60 days or who are going to speak on an item that will come in front of council within the next 60 days. Speakers will be given 3 minutes to speak, and as I said, only 3 speakers will be allowed to speak to any one side of a particular topic. And with that, I'll call our first speaker, who is Gina Kavesh.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. My name is Gina Kavish. I'm a Bellevue resident and a board member and co-chair of Cascade Bicycle Club, speaking tonight on behalf of Cascade. We support Bike Bellevue because it makes a modest but dramatically needed improvements to make biking in Bellevue safer and more comfortable. I'm a cyclist who commutes through Bellevue 2 times a week. Part of my commute route has benefited from the low-cost yet significantly impactful improvements Bellevue has made on Main Street. However, much of my commute intersects with the existing disconnected Bike Bellevue corridor, which typically results in 1 close call per day. Think of that. Once a day, I'm at risk of dying. However, much of my commute intersects in light of I'm also a regular visitor to downtown Bellevue by car and appreciate the balancing act of ensuring vehicles and cyclists can traverse the city efficiently and safely. But I know it can be done, and I implore you to make Bike Bellevue a priority. In light of the Bike Bellevue agenda item today, we want to provide the following comments. Please keep Bike Bellevue whole. As such, we request you strike E as an option for the commission. The commission's role is how to implement, not whether to implement. Delay maintains unsafe conditions on our streets. Please add guidance that the commission move forward in set time parameters. It's March 2 to 3 quarters implemented by the end of the year is feasible, and request that you add this guidance. In collaboration with the commission, staff must be empowered to apply best practices, including travel lane reduction, if deemed appropriate for a given corridor. It's a tool that's worked in places like 108th and 112th. It needs to be an option. We are hoping that tonight's discussion provides clear direction to the commission and empowers staff to do what they are trained to do. Use engineering best practices to make our streets safer. After all, this isn't theoretical, it's about people. Regardless of how we get around, being able to do so safely. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you this evening and for all the work making our community safer.
Thank you. The next speaker is Trevor Reed.
Good evening, Council. My name is Trevor Reed, and I am speaking on behalf of Eastside Urbanism, strongly in favor of Bike Bellevue. Our organization has submitted a letter in support of Bike Bellevue that has been signed by over 192 residents and 14 businesses and organizations in Bellevue. It speaks to the widespread desire to have the freedom to navigate the city safely and efficiently without getting behind a wheel. 3 of the key corridors, Bell Red, 140th Avenue Northeast, and Northrop Way, are on the high injury network, the 8% of roads that account for 83% of serious injuries. As many of you saw in the Seattle Times, 2023 was the deadliest year on Washington's roads since 1990. Per capita, our roads are twice as deadly as Canada's and 4 times deadlier than the world's safest. This is a consequence of not following the data on what makes roads safe. Tonight, you have the opportunity to follow the data. The Federal Highway Administration shortlists 28 measures proven to improve safety. Bicycle lanes are one of them. They are proven to reduce crashes for all users, cars and pedestrians included, by nearly half. Council has heard loudly from plan opponents based on the fear Bike Bellevue will increase congestion due to the proposed removal of 6 lane miles out of an existing 1,100, or 0.5%. I understand how, given existing congestion, any perceived reduction in capacity would dismay. Perception is not reality. Everyone here knows what it's like to sit in congestion. Everyone also knows the experience of a driver speeding past them only to catch up with them at the next light and the next. The reason is that our intersections have far less capacity than the roads feeding them. That is why the lane reductions are estimated to reduce speeds by an imperceptible 0.2 of 1 mile per hour during peak PM periods. We are simply matching the capacity of the roads to their intersections. Congestion hypothetically worsening is why we are here tonight. For one, it is a paradox, since Bike Bellevue will give many a faster, cheaper, and more convenient alternative, decreasing the number of drivers on the road. And 2, it ignores the real safety hazards on our road. While time is money, lives have value too, a whole lot, 10.7 million, according to the Centers for Disease Control. There is no greater financial return than saving lives, and Bike Bellevue will save lives. We have 3 asks of the council tonight. Preserve the Bike Bellevue plan as is, with all corridors maintained. Get the first corridors through, and track the safety and travel impacts on these selected corridors. We acknowledge opponent skepticism and have identified 4 corridors that are buildable without removing any travel lanes with existing funding. They are Wilburton, connecting East Trail and East Link, Lake Washington Boulevard, 116th Avenue, and Northeast 2nd, east of Bellevue Way. We can do all these with money left over. We ask the city use excess funds to improve their corridors to ensure all are comfortable riding, no matter their experience level. Thank you for your time tonight.
Our next speaker is Robert Shen.
Good evening, council members. My name is Robert, and I'm here to speak on behalf of myself. I live up in Bridle Trails, and I'm here today to express my support for Bike Bellevue. Despite only 3 cars, I'm a regular bike commuter. Every morning, I get up and ride 20 miles to Seattle, where I work as an engineer. I'd like to share a story with you, the story of why I care about Bike Bellevue. On January 29th, I was on my routine ride home. As I was traveling northbound on a 2-way bike lane along 120th Northeast, I was hit by a driver pulling out of a BMW dealership. She most likely was trying to turn right while staring at the traffic coming from the left, not realizing that the bike lane is 2-way. Luckily, another bike commuter caught the event on camera, which is what you're looking at right now, and I was mostly unharmed by the collision. However, the outcome was determined by just that, luck. Had there been any oncoming traffic, I would have been ran over after being pushed out onto the road. Had the car been a truck, my body would have gotten sucked under the wheel instead of being rolled onto the hood. I could have been a statistic. The incident shook me up. It took me weeks before I can go back to riding normally. Even now, even when I'm driving, the thought of getting hit still pops in my head every time I roll across a driveway. This story is why I personally have an interest in Bike Bellevue, a project that will rapidly implement on-street bike infrastructure. There has been a lot of talk about building bike infrastructure off-street to avoid taking away car lanes. I don't agree with this solution. Off-street bike lanes take longer to build, both in construction time and time to secure the increased cost and time to acquire the land. This is time that Bellevue cannot afford to waste. The worst part is that they're not even safer. Ask anyone that is a semi-serious bike rider and they will tell you to avoid riding on sidewalks, precisely because it reduces your visibility to cars coming out of driveways. And off-street bike paths are just that, a sidewalk for you to ride a bike on. Bike Bellevue is a really good framework for implementing bike infrastructure. On-street facility in rapidly growing area where people need them. It is based on high-quality, robust data and work from dedicated staff that builds upon your body's stated visions. We cannot say that we are a city sincerely looking to fulfill our multimodal plans or improved road safety if we give up on Bike Bellevue. In light of recent aeronautical engineering industry events, it is safe to say that if you hire engineers, it is best to let the engineers engineer. There are plenty of other people who are not as lucky as me. The possibility of death and serious body injuries adding up every day. We need to fully implement Bike Bellevue as originally proposed, and we need to do it now. The FAA uses the value of life at $9 million. What is the price tag for Bellevue? Thank you.
And I'm sorry, before I move on, Mr. Vanderhook, please come forward. But that was our third and final speaker in support of Bike Bellevue, so we cannot take any more comments in support.
Mayor Robinson, council members, good to see you. My name is Carl Vanderhook, speaking on behalf of Vanderhook Corporation and Old Bellevue. I'm here to reiterate comments I previously made to the Transportation Commission and to staff regarding Bike Bellevue. Please encourage staff and the Transportation Commission to expand the bicycle network only in the following ways. Do not remove vehicle lane capacity or negatively impact traffic in the growth corridor. Do not negatively impact emergency response times, something that has not been a part of the discussion. Require that transparent, consistent, and measurable, accurate data, industry standard data, be used for assessing the impact on each travel lane. Each is key. If pilot, trial, or demonstration projects are recommended, then please ensure that consistent data is measured before and after the project, with a look back and data measured at a given interval to ensure effectiveness of the solution before the trial is made permanent. The current traffic volume data presented by staff is bidirectional. It measures both opposing directions of travel on the entire roadway, curb to curb, during a given time and combines them as one measure of volume. It does not take a traffic engineer to realize that this data disproportionately represents the real-world travel experience, since a vehicle can only travel in one direction at a given time. PM peak hour should be measured in one direction at a time and represented as such. This is the industry standard. The data staff has presented to date combines bidirectional data, which allows for the misperception that there is excess vehicle capacity on the entire road, when in reality the capacity traveling in one direction is already maximized or failing. The data as presented to the Transportation Commission and public is extremely misleading and will lead to outcomes based on inaccurate data. This council has authorized the CIP budget of $4.5 million for the project and expects 3 of the corridors to be implemented by the end of this year. The project cost for all 11 corridors is $18.5 million, so we're way off. Please reiterate to the Transportation Commission and the limited scope and timeline of Bike Bellevue project to expedite their decision-making. It'll make it easier. Additionally, making a one-way street in downtown next to a 20-acre park that hosts numerous events throughout the year is short-sighted and does not consider the long-term impacts. The default bike path is through the downtown park. For this reason, I ask this council to direct staff and the Transportation Commission to categorize Corridor 6, that is Northeast 1st and Northeast 2nd Street, as a corridor no longer under consideration. Don't make it a one-way street. Bellevue needs capacity. Thanks.
Our next speaker on the list is Derek Geldenhuis.
Mayor and council members, I come without a prepared speech. I am an avid bicycle rider. I've ridden all over the world. I am very concerned about the amount of near misses that I have when I'm on my bicycle. I'm not as young as some of the other riders. I live in bridle trails. I have lived in this area for about 40 years. And the fact that I haven't been hit by a car yet is a miracle. I'm not speaking against the bicycle lanes. I'm speaking in favor of the bicycle lanes.
Okay,
I would like to.
excuse me, let me interrupt you just for a moment. It sounds like you're speaking in favor of Bike Bellevue. So we've already had 3
Yeah,
speakers, I'm afraid.
But I'm also speaking in favor of keeping the traffic moving, but we need to keep the traffic moving in a safe way for the
Okay.
cyclists who ride on
Okay,
the streets.
thank you, I think,
Thank you very much.
all right, thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker on the list is Michael Heyer. Mr. Heyer, if you're joining us virtually, can you raise your hand, please?
Yeah, that's.
Okay. The next speaker is Warren Halverson. Mr. Halverson, if you're joining us virtually, can you raise your hand, please? Okay. Moving on, the next speaker is Jaskaran Singh.
Do we have any regulations on signage in City Hall?
The signs cannot block anybody and they can't be affixed to anything. So I
Okay.
think they're okay.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, Council. Good evening, Mayor. Thank you for having me. It's incredibly difficult to talk about this situation, but I feel it's important for the people to understand the human cost behind unpaid rent. Let me make clear, my protest for last 2 weekends is not directed against any individual, any community, any group, any political party, any city, any individual. As an immigrant who made my journey to this country 18 years back, I worked hard to secure better future for my family. I have been responsible citizen and neighbor, paying my taxes and following the law. But still, I find myself standing before you today, seeking justice for my rights. This house is supposed to my dream come true, a place secure for my future, maybe even leave something for my children someday. But the legal system in King County has failed me. Despite repeated attempts to seek justice, I have been met with delays upon delays. It's as if system is designed to protect the rights of tenants at the expense of landlords like myself. Months of court dates, paperwork, lawyer fees, all while I carry a burden of this mortgage. The financial burden is just one part of it, but what is worst is a mental toll. It's taken me and my family. This doesn't end here. Adding insult to the injury to these challenges, my freedom of speech, the court has gave temporary restraining orders against the landlord to silence himself by simply requesting his overdue rent. What is my mistake? I am requesting rent which is overdue for last 12 months. Is it a crime? This situation raises serious question about the fairness and the legal system. It is unacceptable that a tenant has all the rights to live for free in someone else's house and owner doesn't even have right to ask for overdue rent. What kind of America this is? What kind of democracy this is? You can't have people just willingly refusing to pay their rent. You can't expect landlord to just give those people free pass. That's unfair. This isn't just for me. It's about countless other landlords struggling the same issue. We can't have a society where people take advantage of the system, threaten the well-being of others. We need a swift justice, not years of waiting, financial hardship. My story is we need a stronger protection for the landlords. Small landlords, mom and pop should be protected.
Mr. Singh,
Yeah.
your time has expired.
Yeah.
I will call the next person, which is Manpreet Kaur.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for all of you who have come here to support us tonight. I will like to say it again that it is unacceptable that the tenant has all the rights to live for free in someone else's home and the owner does not even have right to ask for his overdue rent. What kind of democracy is this? We are here to highlight the fact that our tenant in Bellevue has not paid rent for almost 2 years. This has been going unchecked and seems to be expected as normal by our legal system. Our question to government and to our leaders here tonight is how this situation can be considered right and justified. Who will bear the cost of our mortgage, property tax, and legal fees that we are paying to our attorney? Also, want to mention here that our tenant is getting free attorney and free legal advice from Housing Justice Project. There are a lot of organizations that are available to help people facing homelessness and evictions, which is great. One such organization is Housing Justice Project. I was looking at their website, and it clearly states a vacated conviction is removed from public background searches available to employers and potential landlords. How can this be justified? Erasing someone's background does not help landlords. What is the use of background checks? We've already had more than 12 hearings in court, and next one is April 5th. I'm here to mention that justice delayed is justice denied, and right now we feel that and we are going through this. This started as our personal legal matter, but it looks like a lot of people are suffering with the same issue. And this should be resolved as soon as possible so that we still as immigrants feel that there's hope and there's light at the end of the tunnel. Justice delayed is justice denied. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to circle back and ask if Michael Heyer or Warren Halverson are joining us. If you are online, please use the raise hand function or *9 if you're connected with a phone. Okay, I will move on. The next speaker is Heidi Dean. You can do that. The next speaker would be Maria Frost.
Council members, thank you for your continued engagement on Bike Bellevue. We're especially grateful that Director Singalakis paused this project to get additional direction and input from the public, stakeholders, and from you. These decisions are consequential for Bellevue's future, so it is worthwhile to take the time to get them right. Removing road lanes from Bellevue's arterials, as Bike Bellevue proposes to do, is out of step with both Comprehensive Plan Policy TR2, which states the city will aggressively plan, manage, and expand transportation investments to reduce congestion, and with the 4th Bike Bellevue principle you approved last year, which directs staff to maximize the mobility of all modes. It's also out of step with the residential and vehicular traffic growth the city is expecting over the next 20 years. Please direct staff.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, I'm going to interject. Mr. Zimmerman, could you please not talk during public testimony? That's a warning. Go ahead.
Please direct staff, not the Transportation Commission, but the staff, to redesign Bike Bellevue and develop an alternative plan that expands the city's bike network without removing arterial road lanes. In the agenda memo, staff have asked you to provide direction to the Transportation Commission to develop recommendations for each corridor based on new categories. While this exercise may be useful for the Commission, these categories do not address the clear guidance that is needed for staff and the Bike Bellevue team to develop alternatives that do not remove arterial road lanes, which would help move this conversation forward. Notably, one of the proposed categories is for projects that remove a travel lane, and rather than proposing an alternative, the project is to be evaluated for trial or demonstration. This is concerning given our experience with the bike pilot on 108th. More importantly, many of these corridors need to be removed or modified, not piloted. The city's robust modeling gives us a good indication of the type of congestion that would be created for the vast majority of people trying to access Bellevue. And it's not a few seconds here and there, as was averaged in the Bike Bellevue Guide. In many cases, that increase in traffic congestion is expected to be severe, especially when we take into account the delays that the comp plan projects will occur, even without the proposed road diets. The direction we're asking you to give staff is rooted in our belief that safe and well-connected alternatives do exist to expand bicycle capacity without eliminating a single arterial road lane. And to that end, please consider the map submitted to you jointly by Kemper Development, Wallace Properties, Vanderhook Corporation, and Woosley Properties. Thank you again for your consideration, and we look forward to working on this with you in the coming months.
Thank you. I do see a raised hand online. So Mr. Halverson or Mr. Heyer, is that you? Can you hear me? Mr. Halverson or Mr. Heyer, can you hear me?
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
We can. Can you state your name for the record, please?
Sure can. First of all, thank you very much for taking my call. My name is Warren Halverson, 13701 Northeast 32nd Place. My wife and I have lived in the Bridle Trails neighborhood for over 50 years. Our daughters are now raising their families and paying taxes in this area in Bellevue. I'm here to generally support biking, but I remind all of us, we sure do not want to take actions that are financially unsupportable by Bellevue taxpayers, all of us. I would offer a couple of suggestions. One, in your list of proposed bike Bellevue corridors, page 2, the staff needs to prioritize the 11 proposed bike corridors. Likewise, the staff should provide the reasons behind this prioritization, the why. Currently, you have $4.5 million allocated and want $18.6 million. That's a lot of money and quite a shortfall. We need to live within our means. In addition, we know that estimated costs always have overruns. 2, we know the Transportation Department conducts traffic flow studies. So please provide quantitatively a chart and analysis of these projects' impacts on car and bike usage currently and through 2029. This should help determine our effectiveness and if we are getting our bang for our buck. Another telling but simple chart. 3, what might also help us to show any unintended consequences for each bike lane based upon foreseeable changes in other parts of the comp plan? In other words, I think we should add in what are some of those unintended consequences. For example, in Bridle Trails, the streets of 132nd, 140th, 148th, 24th, and Bell Red Road are all currently overloaded, particularly in and during the busy times in the morning and the evenings. Project 11 of your proposal intersects and removes a lane right where Microsoft traffic intersects 140th. Why would you reduce lanes in the currently heavy traffic congestion areas? We certainly do not want to increase bike and car public safety issues, frustrations, delays, and potential bicycle and car accidents. Let's tie together the dots, so to speak, in this project and these proposals. I want to thank the Transportation Department and the City of Bellevue for all the work they're doing in this planning process, and know it's been a lot of work, and know there's been a lot of lobbying going on. I'm simply asking that you apply common sense and view this issue through more than one lens, the lens of the local tax-paying citizen. Thank you very much. Mike and I very much appreciate your service.
Thank you. That was our third and final speaker sharing opposition or concerns on Bike Bellevue. We cannot take any further comments on Bike Bellevue. And with that, I'll call our next speaker, who's Patrick Satyanathan. Mr. Satyanathan, if you're connected via Zoom, will you please raise your hand? Okay. I will call our final speaker, who's Alex Zimmerman.
The Heil, my dirty damn Nazi fascist junta, with government anti-Semitism. My name is Alex Zimmerman, and I've come to this place and talk about this for many years. 12 years ago, you stop and people shan't speak. nobody doing this. 10 people, 30 minutes, nobody doing this. I speak around from Tacoma to Everett more than 4,000 times. You only one. What is acting like a criminal, like a bandita against Constitution, freedom of speech, Open Public Meeting Act? Is this not America? In Bellevue, you start doing fascism. You always support corporation. You always don't want what these people speak. Today, 25 people. Why are you doing these rules? When you stop in these rules, and 2 years ago, you cut right for end of the meeting speak. Why? Because you are Nazi pig. That's exactly who you are. You are pure bandita. This is exactly who you are. It's America. We have a constitutional right. U.S. Supreme Court talk about this for 50 years. We have a right for freedom of speech. You cut us freedom of speech because you want to be elected. Look, you elected this for 10, 20, 30 years. Why? Why? 90% Bellevue people not support you. For this you make this 10 people 30 minutes, because when you cut people's freedom of speech, you will be re-elected. That's exactly. You're more dangerous than Nazi or communist. You are Nazi pig, a bandito. It's exactly who you are. I talking about this for many years. And look, 150,000 idiots who live in the city for 12 years, no one come and talking. So you cut us freedom of speech. You cut us constitution. 150,000 idiots don't understand. It's America. We have a constitution who exists for 250 years. Who doing this like you doing this? Nobody. And 150,000 people, very smart. With sugar, you can catch more fleas than with vinegar. Look, this idiot, happy, like slave. You know what this means? Because everybody's smart. Nobody want complete situation. You know what this means? Only Alex Zimmerman, a stupid old Jew, you know what this means? Comfort 30 years here in talking about this. So you are pure Nazi pig. Stop doing this. Open this like you did before. I 30 years speak here. Stand up, America. We need bring Bellevue to America, because fascism with corporation is exactly what is you doing. For this you stopping us. Stand up, America. We need be all free in this world. Thank you very much.
That does bring us to the end of oral communication. So Mayor, I'll turn it back to you.
You know, Bellevue is one of the most educated cities in the country, and we are one of the most innovative cities in the country. Did you know that more people in Bellevue get issued patents than any other city in the country? And I really appreciate that, and I appreciate that everybody, save for one or two people, have the ability to express their agreement or disagreement, their recommendations, their opposition in a civil way, in a way that's respectful. So I want to thank all of you. All right, next up we have the report of the city manager.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. I have 2 items tonight for the city manager's report. The first is I would like to provide a follow-up on medical insurance coverage for employees who incur serious on-the-job injuries. A few weeks ago, I gave the council an update on the situation facing Officer Beretta, who was seriously injured last year. And at that time, I indicated that staff was looking at our policies and evaluating them to see if we could find some options in the near term. And I'm happy to say that we presented an option to our bargaining units for a near-term 2-year solution. And we have agreement from BPOG and most of the other unions on that solution. What that will do is that the city will provide cover the COBRA costs for employees who were seriously injured on the job and have extended approved leave. So currently our coverage, our medical insurance coverage 6 months. What this solution will do is that the city will cover the cost of COBRA for an additional 6 months if they're on the approved leave, with an option for another 6 months of COBRA coverage if they have an extraordinary situation. I want to thank BPOG for their partnership in working through this issue and for their support of the solution. And I also am very happy to report that this will apply to Officer Beretta and all of our employees. So we look forward to continuing to work on a long-term solution, but this offers a near-term solution that we're very happy with. So thank you. And now for our second city manager update. That's a federal funding update. And we have a few people here to share with council the outcome of our federal relations program, and in particular how we've done on some of our earmarks. So I'm going to turn this over to Genesee Atkins, Chief of External Affairs, who will introduce the topics. And would you like to introduce our speakers as well? Okay, with that, Genesee.
All right. City Manager, thank you. Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and council members, thank you for giving us a few minutes this evening. It's a pleasure to give you an update on an important piece of our intergovernmental affairs program from our federal relations desk. The federal earmarks process is a recurring annual process that returned just a few years ago and something that we have participated in annually for the last few years. Can I get the next slide? We are really proud that we're able to work with our congressional officials in both the House and the Senate to advance priorities that align and advance your adopted federal priorities each year. So these are in service of the City Council's adopted federal priorities. It has been a pleasure to help promote these really exciting programs. We are really pleased that we've been so successful in the fiscal year 2024 program. And so it is my pleasure to introduce to you Assistant Chief of Police Andrew Popachak, Director of Information Technology Saber Schneider, and our Fire Chief Jay Hagan. And so I think we'll start all the way at the far end and then come over. Thank you very much.
Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and Council. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you tonight regarding the Bellevue Police Body-Worn Camera Program. In 2023, City of Bellevue applied for assistance in funding the Body-Worn Camera Program for the Police Department. Representative Del Bene and Senator Cantwell requested federal funding to support us. This year, we received the great news that the City of Bellevue received federal funding in the amount of $963,000. As of today, body-worn cameras have been deployed to over 75% of our officers, and we are on track to complete deployment to the entire commission staff by the first week of April. So you can see I'm currently wearing one myself. We also deployed new tasers to over 80% of our officers, and we are also on track to complete deployment to all of our commission staff by the first week of April. Resources like this protect our officers, give them the ability to de-escalate critical situations, and provide transparency with our community. The police department would like to thank the council, the community, and other city departments for the support as we researched, selected, and deployed this new program. Thank you.
To your point earlier in the meeting, Mayor, I'd also like to point out all three of these proposals really showcase innovation in Bellevue, which I think is really exciting. Thank you for having us this evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and council members. I'm thrilled to be here tonight to talk to you about the Digital Equity and Affordable Housing Grant, which was awarded by Representative Smith and Senator Cantwell for $500,000 to pilot innovative ways of providing high-speed internet access in affordable housing properties in Bellevue. This particular grant will let us pilot some different things other than providing just Wi-Fi, which is what we've historically done opportunistically in some affordable housing properties. Our vision for digital equity for affordable housing is that free high-speed internet access would come by default if you qualify for subsidized affordable housing in Bellevue. And this will let us experiment with that a little bit. I want to thank the council and our federal delegation for their support of this work. I'd also very much like to thank our community partners for their support and interest in helping us with this. And that's the Eastgate Housing Roundtable, the 5G Innovation Labs, T-Mobile, Trident, King County Housing Authority, and Plymouth Housing all greatly contributed to this grant proposal. And this proposal was a partnership between IT and the community development departments. So thank you again for letting us talk about it tonight.
Good evening, Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor Malakutian, members of council, great to see you. Thank you for allowing me to provide a brief update on the electric apparatus project, in which Bellevue Fire is purchasing an electric fire engine and incorporating EV charging infrastructure into both Fire Station 1 and Fire Station 10, which, as you know, is currently under construction. We're pleased to announce that significant progress has been made on this front. This project signifies a crucial and concrete step forward in enhancing firefighter safety and well-being through the adoption of cleaner, emission-free fire apparatus operations. This technology aligns perfectly with the nature of our frequent short-distance trips when responding to community emergencies. We are enthusiastic about actively participating in the city's ongoing commitment to environmental stewardship. We would also like to express our gratitude to the council and our legislative team for their unwavering support of this multi-pronged funding approach, which has been instrumental in turning this project into a reality. Collaborating with the Washington State Department of Ecology, as well as our state and federal delegations across multiple funding cycles, has proven invaluable in achieving this noteworthy milestone. In partnership with the City of Redmond, we anticipate becoming the first 2 fire departments in the Pacific Northwest to achieve this milestone. We remain committed to keeping you updated as this project continues to progress. Thank you again for your support and dedication to enhancing public safety and environmental responsibility in our community.
Great, wonderful news all around, thank you. Anything else, City Manager?
Thank you.
Okay. All right, we have, under council business and the new initiatives, we have recommendations for reappointments and a recommendation for an appointment. So why don't we start, do you mind if I, did you want to add anything, City Manager?
No, Mayor, please proceed. Thanks.
We're doing okay, okay. So I'm going to have the Deputy Mayor make a motion.
I
And it's a
move
big
to
one.
reappoint Monique Martinez to the Arts Commission, Eileen Chow to the Parks and Community Service Board, Johnny Liu to the Planning Commission, and Nick Reben and Drew McGill to the Transportation Commission, each reappointment term ending May 31st, 2028.
Second.
All right, any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. And then the next one, I'm going to have Councilmember Hamilton make the motion, and you can mention who you're recommending to the Parks Board.
Thank you, Mayor. Certainly want to just take a second to thank Parks Board Chair Paul Clark, Director Shiosaki, and Assistant Director Parker for helping in the selection process of choosing the candidate to put forward. But a lot of really good candidates apply. We landed on one final candidate who I think is going to do well, but certainly encourage everyone to take a shot at getting on a board or commission. The work is really rewarding, and certainly hope those that are not being appointed tonight will reapply again. And with that, I would like to move to appoint Steve Chainlin to the Parks and Community Services Board to fill a partial term ending May 31st, 2024, as well as a full term ending May 31st, 2028.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Terrific. Well, those are pretty big shoes he has to fill there.
Yeah.
I believe that was your seat.
It was.
Okay, next we have the consent calendar. Do I have a motion to, what, have I missed something?
We added a third item under new business 7C.
Oh, that's right. Thank you so much.
So I'd like to move to direct staff to proceed with the negotiation of a contract with Hillary Evans for ethics officer services.
Second.
Thank you for reminding me. Any comments or discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you for that. All right, is there a motion to approve the consent calendar?
I move to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so we have, I believe, 2 major study session items. So, City Manager, let's let you describe them.
Thank you, Mayor Robinson. We have 2 study session items, as you indicated, and the first is an informational update on water supply negotiations and a recommended proposal from our colleagues at Cascade Water Alliance. This briefing is an opportunity to provide feedback to Councilmember Hamilton, who is Bellevue's representative on the Cascade Board. And from Cascade, I would like to welcome Chuck Clark, Water Supply Negotiations Lead, and Ed Sebrin, Chief Economist. And then we also are joined by Lucy Liu, our Director of Utilities. And I don't see Ella, but, oh, okay. So we have Ella Williams, also Staff Resource. And with that, I will hand it over to Lucy to kick off the presentation. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and council members. The Cascade Water Alliance is a very important regional partner for Bellevue. We buy all of our water supply from Cascade, and Bellevue is Cascade's largest member. Payments to Cascade represent about 1/3 of the operating budget for our water utility, and so we appreciate Cascade's efforts to secure a cost-effective source of reliable, high-quality water supply for its members. Cascade has been working to renegotiate its water supply contracts both with Seattle Public Utilities and Tacoma Public Utilities, and they've reached a point where both agencies have presented fairly final proposals, and Cascade anticipates that its board of directors will be providing direction on which agency to pursue a new contract with at its next board meeting in April. And so we have invited Chuck Clark, Chief Lead Negotiator, and Ed Sebrin, Chief Economist, to provide a briefing on the latest proposals, as well as just to discuss the implications of these proposals for Cascade members, including Bellevue. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Clark and Mr. Sebrin.
Thank you, Lucy. Mayor, council members, thank you for the opportunity today and for the time to be able to lay out for you some of the discussions we've had, particularly with Tacoma and Seattle. Several years ago, the board directed Cascade staff to take a look at extending the current water contracts that we had in place that start to decline in 2039. And I'll come back and talk about that a little bit later. But when they did, they said they would like us to look at a couple things. One, they were hoping that we could get at least a 20-year extension on the contract with whoever was willing to put a project proposal in place. 2, they wanted to provide certainty of supply for a 20-year extension. So from 2039 to 2059, they wanted certainty. But they also wanted the staff in the negotiations to try to get flexibility for future board members so that if other opportunities arose in the future for getting cost-effective water supply, that the board would have the flexibility to make a decision at a later date, so that although you were looking at an extension, you were also trying to provide flexibility for future decision makers to be able to look at what was available at the time. As we know, when we make forecasts on water supply and demand, when we make them today, we know specifically that they are wrong. We know we make our best estimate, but that's about the best we can do. And so giving flexibility to future decision makers and not locking them in so that they don't have options was important to the board. 2, they wanted us, or 3, they wanted us to look at resiliency, particularly when you start looking at earthquakes in the region and you look at, you could look at snowpack this year. They were hoping that by looking at interties or looking at other options in the region, we would be able to improve resiliency when you looked ahead in the future. They wanted to encourage regional solutions so that if when we got into negotiations or discussions with Seattle or Tacoma or others, that they would be interested in looking at regional solutions that could include lake taps as part of a regional solution. And finally, they wanted to make sure that we assured drinking water quality for our residents, and that we did the best we could to optimize the benefits on rates. That as we look to the future, we knew the pressure on rates was going to continue to be a challenge, and so make sure and try to optimize the best possibility you could on rates. Could you minimize costs going forward so that we could try and manage those the best way we could? Today, we'd like to do a couple of things. We'll give you a quick overview of Cascade. Some of you know, I've been here before when I was CEO of Cascade and was able to go through some of this, but for some, it may be somewhat new. Some of the current contract terms we're currently under with Seattle, I'll highlight those. We'll talk about why negotiations are occurring now. A quick overview of Seattle and Tacoma's proposals, the two that we have received, and compare them a little bit to building out at Lake Taps, and then our preliminary recommendation and timeline. Next. As many of you know, Cascade was set up in 1999. Actually, the first contracts with Seattle, I signed for Seattle, not for Cascade at the time, since I was either the deputy mayor at Seattle or the director of Seattle Public Utilities at the time. So my name is on those contracts, but not for Cascade, but for Seattle. And so the original contracts were signed that provided water for Cascade. There were a few members besides 7 when it was originally set up. Mercer Island was a member, Covington was a member, both later withdrew from Cascade. It serves about 25% of Seattle's entire service area, about 380,000 customers, 20,000 businesses. So we are a significant part of the Seattle system. It's governed by a board of directors. Council member Hamilton and Council member Stokes are on the Cascade board, but they set the direction and policy for the staff. And we acquired Lake Taps in 2009 as a future source of supply. In many ways, it was purchased as an insurance option for the future. And Bellevue was a main instigator, since I was negotiating with Bellevue at the time, for Cascade being established and having independence on being able to make decisions over where they were going to be able to purchase additional water. At the time, they purchased it from Seattle, but Cascade wanted to maintain its flexibility to look at building Lake Taps or looking at other options in the future. Next. The current contract with Seattle is called a take-or-pay contract. We have a contract for 33.3 million gallons of water. On average, we use only about 28. We pay for 33.3. However, we pay at a discount, and it's a fairly significant discount. So when you look at unit cost of water, Cascade pays less for unit of water they purchase from Seattle than the other wholesale customers do. I'm also a commissioner at Woodinville Water, so I know what we pay for water, and Cascade pays slightly less per unit than other wholesale customers do, even though we have to pay for 33.3 million gallons and aren't using it all. It's termed a block. That block contract starts to decline in 2039. The reason that the board sent us away to start looking at extensions. The contract, when it starts to decline, it declines all the way down through 2063, 2064, at which point the 33.3 becomes 5.3, and that's all that we will continue then to purchase and use from Seattle. If you look at Lake Taps service demands and you look at supply, right now there are member supplies, so some of our members have wells and provide water. There's an SPU block There is, as you see, when we looked at demand, there was some fear that sooner rather than later we would have to build lake taps. And the issue is we would like to optimize the best economic terms for our ratepayers. So one of the reasons the board sent us away to start talking to Seattle and Tacoma was you can compare those to lakes taps and then determine what is in the best interest of the ratepayer. And so we knew that if we didn't get an extension, we'd have to start planning, because to do a project like Lake Taps, it's a $2 billion project, including treatment and pipelines, you'd have to get started sooner rather than later, because it takes 15, 20 years to be able to put a significant project together. And so we started having discussions both with Seattle and Tacoma to see what options might be available from either one of them. Next. If you look regionally at water supply, and this is fairly significant if you look at Tacoma, Seattle, and Everett, and you look all the way out through 2060, the region has a lot of water available for use. Even with climate change scenarios, and when you calculate potential climate change impacts, there still is significant water, which leads to the question, why can't you figure out a way to utilize regional water rather than having to run off and build additional supply alternatives? And again, a reason to talk to Seattle and Tacoma. If you could start treating water like electricity in many ways, where you're able to move water molecules throughout the region, can you effectively do a better job at managing the existing resource rather than stressing the resource in other ways? And so that has led us to the discussions with both Seattle and Tacoma. And with that, I think I'll have Ed go through some of the economics and what we've gotten from Seattle and Tacoma. Leading into that, I'll say just a couple comments, because I do have a parochial view about Seattle, and if we could have figured out gotten them to provide a better alternative, I would have been much more comfortable. But Tacoma has been much more engaging in these discussions, and much more engaging actually in looking at the future and being willing to look at utilizing lake taps as part of a regional solution, which Seattle has said they have no interest in. And so as we go through these discussions, I'd also like to mention that being able to have interest in lake taps as a regional solution means others could share in the costs of lake taps when you look to the future, rather than just it being subjected to the members of Cascade. So with that, Ed?
Thank you, Chuck. So I was going to give you a brief summary of what we wound up with on the table. With Seattle, they were extremely uncomfortable with long-term firm commitments. They did propose a 10-year guaranteed extension. In order to secure that, we needed to pay higher rates beginning now than in our current contract, plus an additional $14 million in additional payments related to the past rate advantage that we had. They did offer that there could be extensions, possibly 2 5-year extensions, but those were conditional on a number of factors, including their supply and demand forecast in the future. And if certain conditions weren't met, namely an amount of supply surplus that matched what they would commit to us plus a safety margin, then those extensions were not available. Late in the negotiations, they modified that to, for the first extension, to say they would be willing to guarantee the first extension if we would pay a 25% premium, which equates to about $20 million for that 5-year period. They also offered an additional wrinkle that was a 40-year conditional contract that would begin at the end of those extension periods, But it was highly conditional. It was conditional on having been able to secure the 2 5-year extensions, again meet a test for availability of supply, and then they added 2 more features that are noted here. One is that they would have to have entered an intertie agreement with another major utility by 2044 for additional supply, despite their supply planning, which contemplates no such intertie agreement, and that we would pay we or the members that chose to go this path would pay a 25% rate premium compared to the other wholesale customers. Essentially, this is somewhat of a phantom option in our mind. The probability is probably well below 10% that this could ever be realized. So it didn't provide us the certainty that our board asked for. Tacoma, in comparison, it's a simpler deal. In some ways, it's harder because we're starting from scratch where we have an existing contract with Seattle in place. But what Tacoma has brought to the table is a 25-year guaranteed contract. The rates that we would pay for the water in that contract are about 20% below Seattle's, and the payments are largely based on the actual water used, not a block contract, which gives us financial flexibility. As our supply commitment from Seattle declines, we'll take more and more water from Tacoma, but we're not paying continuously for that higher quantity. Looking at the other challenge with Tacoma is we're not connected to their system. Seattle delivers water to all our members right now on our behalf. With Tacoma, we have to undertake a capital improvement program. This map is an excerpt from our system planning, and you'll see graphs very similar, or maps very similar to this in our 2 previous system plans. But for the Tacoma water to be delivered to us, we envision 2 pipe segments that are needed. I was hopeful that was a pointer. All right, to the right of this map, there's a red corridor that you can see marked. The central transmission pipe and the north transmission pipe would deliver Tacoma water from their main transmission east-west up to Issaquah, where the Bellevue-Issaquah pipeline would then allow us to convey it further back to Bellevue. In order for that to meet our needs long-term, there's other infrastructure improvements needed as well, but these are the major ones that would get us connected and delivering water in the 2030s when construction would occur. For the Seattle option, we don't need anything initially because, again, they're already delivering water. However, ultimately, at the end of that contract, we'd be faced with developing the entire Lake Tapps system, beginning from the treatment plant in the south at Lake Tapps, another segment of pipe, and the 2 more northerly segments of pipe, as well as other in-system improvements. The 40-year option does have the intriguing aspect that if it were in fact something we could consider permanently, we'd never have to build this infrastructure and permanently save that cost. With Tacoma, one of the advantages is we can phase the construction. We build the pieces to connect them in the 30s to get it online around 2040. Then when we need Lake Tapps, we only have the south segment plus the treatment plant to complete and deliver water. So all of these become factors in our analysis of capital costs over time and rates. With this, okay, thank you. Forgot one point. I apologize. We are also beginning to pursue or contemplating the pursuit of options that could further reduce our initial capital needs and perhaps long-term needs with the Tacoma option. And that would be to go back to Seattle and secure terms for them to wheel water to you and our other members, as opposed to have us having to build that north transmission pipe and the in-system infrastructure that's currently in our plan. We would then have capital savings. We'd have a new cost to pay for wheeling, but we can work towards a mutually beneficial agreement if that's possible. So we hope to go back to Seattle if we go down this Tacoma path, and if they're willing to discuss that, it could be a beneficial option for both of us. So some of the simple results in terms of these options: the Seattle 10-year option saves us about $53 million. That's in present value compared to the Lake Tapps construction on the current schedule. If we got one 5-year extension, that increases to about 100. If we got both of them, up to about 130. The 40-year option, assuming we never had to build lake taps, that number goes up dramatically because we save that huge infrastructure investment, and it's about $900 million. Although if we have to build lake taps at the end of that contract, most of that savings disappears and we're back down in the $400-some million range of savings. The Tacoma contract on the table, with what it allows us in deferral of lake taps, the savings on water purchases, basically provides us nearly $300 million in savings compared to the path we're on right now. So this is very significant in terms of the benefits of any of these options that allow us to defer lake taps, but particularly that Tacoma option. Moving that into rates and looking at impacts on the cost of delivering water, they vary quite a bit, mostly in terms of when the major infrastructure is needed. The green line on this graph is Tacoma, and there's a bump upwards in the 30s, which is related to that initial pipeline construction, and then when Lake Tapps comes on in the mid-60s, another bump. Seattle's a flatter path thanks to the extension, but then a significant jump upwards when we have to build the entire project in one fell swoop. It's worth noting that this is not the rate forecast that we would be proposing to the board and to you as members. This is a direct and equitable comparison across the scenarios without a lot of the overlay of what we would be doing going forward now, which includes overlaying our fiscal policies to smooth out rate and reduce rate impacts, and also to explore infrastructure options. Chuck mentioned wheeling a little earlier. That's one that could change this graph dramatically. Another is we need to determine sizing for the pipelines and scheduling of pipelines in a way that it's quite possible that jump in the Tacoma scenario in the 30s could be drastically reduced. And perhaps some of these costs avoided and ultimately keep closer to that long-term extension that the One Seattle option potentially offers. The 40-year option does appear to be the lowest cost option, but it's also the lowest probability, the highest risk in terms of relying on that in the future. An interesting sidebar is if you go that path, we wind up without that capital improvement program, which means our regional connection charge goes down and that cost shifts back to rates. So the savings for the ratepayer is not as great as the $900 million number that you saw might suggest. Another key point is Seattle is only willing to offer that to individual members who basically leave Cascade to go to Seattle for supply and not to Cascade itself as their representatives. The members who opt in could remain in Cascade because they'll still have legal and financial responsibilities to fulfill, or they could leave. And with leaving under the Cascade structure, there is a payment due, a buyout that's determined based on the cost impact of that departure. The most recent time we did that, if it were today and Bellevue were to give its notice, the estimated buyout is on the order of $350 million. And that reflects contract and capital commitments in the future, as well as operational commitments that can't be avoided, and with a member leaving, would be shared among the remaining members. Our preliminary recommendation is to go with Tacoma. We believe it provides a number of benefits. We have longer supply certainty. We have flexibility to adapt. By interconnecting two systems, we have greater resiliency, as Chuck mentioned, for earthquake or for climate change. We also have more available supply, which reduces our risk year to year in terms of droughts and the like. It's more cost effective compared to the guaranteed portions of Seattle's options. It breaks up the construction program into pieces that reduces construction risk and gives us more time to complete the program in timely fashion rather than having to pre-build everything. And it provides the opportunity for regionalism by beginning to connect major systems, in this case Tacoma, Seattle, and ultimately Lake Tapps, but also the resiliency that that offers. In water supply, you gain resiliency through redundancy, and having more watersheds providing supply gives you more flexibility and adaptability.
From a schedule standpoint and getting a decision from the board. You were actually the last of the briefings I've done. I've done all 5 of the city councils and 2 of the districts. So tonight was the last of my round of briefing each one. And going through, each one was slightly different based on their interests. But we will now have a board discussion later this week. We're hoping to get some direction from the Cascade Board in April, at the April meeting, and the only direction we're asking at this point is if there's an agreement that Tacoma is an option, then we would like direction to proceed in trying to negotiate a contract with Tacoma. If for some reason the board would like to do Seattle, we would again like the direction to negotiate with Seattle. Our recommendation will remain Tacoma at this point. And the reason we want to start getting into negotiations is one thing to have a term sheet. It's another thing to have a contract. And we want to make sure that everything is down in black and white. And then we hope that what we would look at is a decision from the board in the fall, probably in early fall, over whether the terms and conditions they saw in those negotiated contracts were something that they agreed to and would like us to proceed with. So the timing is April for some direction from the board on negotiating a contract, and then a decision on a contract in the fall. And that's it.
Obviously, you're here to answer our questions and to inform us. Is there anything you need from us tonight?
We're not asking for a decision or direction. Ultimately, your representative on our board will be asked to vote next month.
Perfect. Okay. Well, let's start with Councilmember Hamilton, who is representing us on Cascade.
Great. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Clark, Mr. Friedman, for such a detailed presentation. It's a lot of technical and important information, and I'm glad we have the chance to view it and discuss it, and certainly interested in hearing feedback and thoughts from my colleagues. Councilmember Stokes and I have been working with Cascade and with our staff to get a better understanding of what the impacts of the different proposals would be. And you see this in the agenda memo. I think at this point, I would strongly recommend to pursue further negotiations with Tacoma. And I think unless Seattle comes back with some significantly different offer, I'd feel comfortable moving forward to solidify a new contract with Tacoma.
Thank you. Just as a note, I did 2 weeks ago, week and a half, 2 weeks ago, Seattle said, well, you could give us another counter proposal. I sent them something that said, although it isn't quite as beneficial as Seattle, something closer to this would at least be somewhat competitive for the board. I don't know that I'm going to hear, well, I have a pretty good guess what I'm going to get back. So,
from what I understand, that seems right. And definitely, again, I just would welcome my colleagues' thoughts on that approach and hearing additional comments or questions. And Mayor, if I could just start off with a couple of questions? Yes. Okay. So on slide 9, or maybe it's the second slide 8, you show some financial information for the different proposals. Yes, thank you.
It's the second slide 8. I apologize for that.
That's all right. We got there. So just kind of comparing net present values to the current contract, and I'm just curious if you could explain how the net present value shows savings in the near term versus in the long term.
All right. In the near term, actually, if I can go to the picture, it shows a bit of that. In the near term, if we are going with the base case, that's that shaded area, and we're on a very steep ramp very soon to pay for lake taps during the 2030s. We're also challenged just to secure financing. As an agency of our size, to now finance a $2 billion project that's not assured, which is part of the reason we need to ramp up quickly to demonstrate our financial capability. The Seattle scenarios have a cost profile that's consistent with inflation for the next 10 years or so, with the extension, perhaps 20 years. But then there's an enormous spike. You're talking about a tripling of our water rates, which would mean 150%, up to 150% increase in your water rates to pay for that. In a very short time, it's over about a 5-year period. When we move that into planning, we would begin ramping that up much sooner so that we don't have to borrow as much and we can smooth that peak and reduce the ultimate impact, but it's still going to be significant. The Tacoma scenario actually has the lowest cost profile in the near term, primarily because we maintain the cost advantage of the existing Seattle contract, and we have a smaller hill to climb to get Tacoma connected. And so it provides, very moderate rates in the very near term, say the rest of this decade, and then a rate increase during the 30s as we're in construction. But again, with planning, we keep rates nearer inflation in the near term and then use that to buy down the impact as we get that project going.
So, and two, just what creates the savings for the 40-year conditional offer from Seattle?
All right. Essentially, the two biggest costs in our cost profile are what we pay for wholesale water and what we have to build and then operate. So in all of these scenarios, save that one, we're ultimately building that $2 billion Lake Tapps project. It's just a question of timing. In the meantime, we're paying wholesale rates to allow us to defer when we build it. In the 40-year contract, in that scenario, that gets us to 2099. My analysis only goes to 2100, but essentially, we avoid all that infrastructure cost. So that $2 billion isn't spent. And it's not just that it's not spent 30 years from now, it's also not spent 50 or 70 years from now. And that's the primary savings that you see there. We're actually paying more for wholesale water to get that in the terms that Seattle's provided us, but the capital savings bring home the overall savings. That's why the question as to whether it really is a permanent supply relationship is critical. Because if we ultimately have to build Lake Tapps, we're on a similar timeline where we have to build the entire project at one time. Conditions will not be simpler 75 years from now, and the challenge will be daunting. And that's when, as I said, we lose more than half of those savings.
Okay. And two, then along those same lines, can you share some additional information on what the expected rate impacts would be for Cascade and Bellevue?
Yes. For the remainder of the 2020s, our rates will probably be going up a little bit above our inflation assumption. If we're using a 3% inflation assumption, we're probably in the 3.5% to 4% range. And that's primarily to build up cash resources so we don't have to borrow every penny, which our fiscal policies actually don't allow, and also to build up the financial capacity to keep our good bond rating so we can keep the cost of debt down. And so that is the primary driver. Otherwise, we'd be at something more like inflation or even below. With the Seattle scenario, they've front-loaded a fair number of costs in rate increases compared to what we enjoy under the current contract. So there's actually there's greater rate pressure in the near term in the Seattle contract. Probably still wouldn't exceed 4%, but it could be on the order of 4% during the remainder of this decade. So the very near term, not very much difference. It's really in how we play out to having a permanent supply strategy.
Okay. So two, I think we'd all be interested in seeing the rate impacts, kind of especially over time, like in the graph that you showed. Mm-hmm. So to be able to see how those options translate, I think would be helpful into wholesale costs for Bellevue ratepayers. So all right. If we could get that, that'd be awesome.
We can do that.
All right. Again, thank you very much. Thank you, Mayor.
Good questions. Councilmember Stokes, how about you? You were on Cascade for a long time.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, it's about, 10, 11, 12 years, I guess. And we've been going through this process for some time, and it's the only thing, it's just hard to imagine that we're planning for things that are in 40, 50 years out from here. And but it's something that we've worked on with all the cities working together, and we are not going to run out of water for Bellevue. So we get down to this, we've had a contract with Seattle for a long time. There's been a lot of talk over the years of making changes and everything else, and so we've been working with them to try to get the rates that were reasonable and work with that, and looking at lake taps, whether we need that in the future. We made a lot of investment in that, and it's also something a very invaluable asset for the community and for us if we need it. So but it is amazing to have to play with these numbers in a sense. But we've been working very steadily and very well with getting to the future so that we don't have any break in our water supplies. I mean, that's something that it makes life. The city, Bellevue has been a very strong member of Cascade, but we also have very good people we work with, both smaller groups and others like Issaquah and Kirkland. And so it's an interesting thing that came about because Tacoma has been working for some time on this. They are also, one thing that's interesting to it is they are closer to lake taps down that area, and some of the infrastructure we'd have to build would be something that if we decide to go to lake taps eventually, that infrastructure would be a lot closer and something we probably would have to build anyhow, in a sense. So the other factor in this, and I was on several of these meetings, I was a liaison, and then we got Dave, and Dave has really been a great asset to that, and he's learning a lot more of these things, a little more than Parks Board and other things, it's good to have his viewpoint of this as well, because in looking and hearing both the presentations, one thing is Seattle was kind of well, we'll do it, but we're not really, really going to press on it. We're not really trying to sell it to you, but just to do it because we're here. And then Tacoma has come up with and has really improved themselves over a period, not that long, but Tacoma has a really good system, and they have good water there too. And they're very amenable to working with us. What has been, I think, making a difference in this, even if they were kind of close, is that we believe that working with Tacoma and the Tacoma contract is going to be to everybody's benefit for a lot of reasons than continuing to go with Seattle. It's just one of those business decisions to make, and the work has been very good, and we have people that, in fact, the two sitting there, and then our leader here know this business like the back of their hand. I mean, so we're very well represented by people who know this and have gone through this for a long, long time. So in making this decision, we have those very good assets, and a way to look at this is that do we go with Seattle, do we go with Tacoma? So we put it all together, and it's really been good to have Dave come in, not knowing anything about this really, and really getting into it. And of course, I think his business acumen is really helpful. So it's been very positive on that too. So I agree. I think Tacoma is the way to go. And we'll work on this, and one of these days we could get more information from it that any individual council member would like to have, and but I think it's been just an extraordinary effort by Cascade and by the members. And again, one of the things that helps too is the membership of Cascade, all the different cities and a couple of, 3 different water supply companies all work together in a very, very good way. And they've been very strongly for this in the meetings, and so I agree with Dave that this is something we should go forward on.
Great. Thank you. Councilmember Lee, you were also involved with Cascade.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, this is real topic that I'm glad that we have Chuck, a person with his history, with experience. This thing is a long time. And so what could that be done without you, Ed? You are providing the real numbers, scenarios for us, and the numbers change. I remember when Cascade Water Alliance was formed, it's because we felt that we need to have our own water source because we could not depend on buying water from Seattle. We have to be independent because we see the water supplies going down, the price keep going up. Eventually, if we don't have our water, we'll be held hostage. What do we do, right? So as things happen, the price is going down, and we have plenty of water. And the scenario is that we have water for the next 50, maybe 100 years. So, and there's Tacoma now is on the scene. So we have some alternatives to choose from, which I think requires, your economic analysis and also the regional reality. What are we looking at? And we can never predict the future 100 years from now, but at least we can go as far as we can. And Lake Taps now prove out to be, because we do have water supply. So it's not necessary we have to develop it right away, but it's turned out to be a good insurance policy because we're not spending that much money, not $2 billion, but we're using it to negotiate, to bargain, to get the best price we can get. So we can only go as far as you can go. So looking at your chart, which you have shown, maybe, the best scenario we can get based on that, Seattle, obviously, if we can get them committed, that's the best deal, right? Or we develop our resource, we don't have to depend on anybody else. That's the best deal because we know we can. But as you mentioned, Seattle is not highly unlikely. So the original scenario is correct. We still need to have a insurance policy. Hopefully, maybe cross your fingers, we never need it. But if we do, we have something that we can work with. And it's reasonable based on your chart. So now we are given a scenario. Tacoma is the new player, and we are getting a better deal, actually, and more likely for the long future scenario. So my question is, for our utility department, we are a big customer, and we understand the different scenarios. And so from our perspective, what is the city's analysis and perspective, and maybe your thoughts on what's the best scenario we can work with? And that also include, obviously, the other members of Cascade Water Alliance. But I believe they will, if we make the right decisions, we make the right choices, they'll come along with us, right? Because we are really the biggest partner to make this work. If we're not in this, it's going to be very difficult. So Lucy's, maybe you can say a few words about what you might think is the best scenario for the city of Bellevue.
Happy to.
And for the region, obviously.
Bellevue staff's recommendation is to do further negotiations with Tacoma because it better aligns with our city policy guidance, and that is that drinking water should be reliable, cost-effective, secure, high quality, and environmentally responsible. And between the two options, Tacoma would meet that better.
Okay, so it seems to me that, based on your analysis and the city's recommendation, as far as we can go, that we can still have some certainty, and your numbers proves it. I think the Tacoma scenario is probably the best. And even though we have to develop the pipeline, assuming Seattle goes away, that's still the most long-term scenario for us. So, things will change. We don't know for sure, but based on what we got, that's the best solution we have.
And Chuck referred to flexibility in the future, so if I could add to that a bit.
Yes.
I think Cascades had two defining moments. One was when it bought Lake Taps, because that gave it leverage, I guess, at the bargaining table.
Insurance policy.
And
leverage.
Once we're connected to Tacoma and we could actually move water and have multiple potential suppliers, including our own at Lake Taps, we will have flexibility going forward that'll give us those opportunities in the future. Internally, we kind of view this as a worst-case scenario. You see those very large spikes in costs out there because we should have ways to keep spreading those out, to keep mitigating those. And that could be a new contract or extension of a contract with Tacoma in the future, with Seattle, with another partner, or maybe a different style of development of lake taps, but getting that interconnection gives us another major tool in trying to achieve this regional balance that Chuck referred to when we look at a surplus of supply in the region and the contemplation of us building a new source in that.
Yes. So I would like to conclude that for the benefit of our representatives on Cascade Water Alliance, that this is really the big picture we need to follow, making sure that we have the leverage, we have the flexibility, making sure what we're doing today, trying to build lake taps, we need to understand all the different scenarios and possibilities, and not overspend making a decision that may lose some of the options for us. I think that's the key, right? If we start developing lake taps, thinking that it's going to be developed, we may have the other scenarios to be lost. So I want to be sure that's what we need to be looking at, working with. So thank you guys for doing that. I appreciate it, especially. So keep up good work. Thank you.
Great. Councilmember Zahn.
Yes, thank you, Ed, Chuck, and Lucy, for the presentation. I agree that, we always want to center the best interest of our ratepayers, which is our community, for water, and also agree with my colleagues to pursue the Tacoma option and the term sheet that you've tentatively provided, because and two things I particularly like. One is that it's not based on block, so we're really paying for the water that we use, because the idea that you're paying for a block of water, whether you use it or not, over time doesn't seem to make sense to me. And then the $300 million savings, that's a big number, so I really appreciate that. The what-if scenarios that you created in, I guess, the first page 8, where, is that right? I'm going backwards. Yes. I mean, to me, that's real money right there. And I hope that as we continue, 10, 20 years down the road, that we continue to have successful negotiation so that, yes, we can keep lake taps as our insurance policy, but not having to spend $2 billion, which by the time you escalate to whenever we actually might need to tap into that, that's a lot of money. So if there's a way to regionally still be able to provide the water resources that we need without having to actually go to that level of infrastructure build, I think that is a really important piece we want to continue to keep an eye on. The other thing, I just want to make sure that I understood from slide 10 is that we would be looking at somewhat this green line. So there were questions asked about the actual the water rates, yes, that we're loosely looking at that green line, which means that we are spreading out the cost increases, and really it's only when we get out to the 2060s that we start to see that spike, which potentially could slide again if we're able to successfully continue to negotiate with Tacoma. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay.
And in fact, I mean, it's been interesting with Tacoma, their hesitancy to go longer term or for more water has been primarily because of transmission limitations, not supply limitations. So even as we get out there, if we needed more water, there may be more available from Tacoma. At the same time, Seattle may be saying, gee, we're selling them 20 million gallons less water. We could keep selling them 10 more. And so there'll be a lot of options of integrating resources in the future that could alter that second spike, keep deferring it, shrink it, smooth it out.
The other interesting discussion we've had with Tacoma that I found fascinating is when we have water, when there's water available at lake taps, sometimes they don't have that water. When there's water available in Tacoma, sometimes it's a stress on lake taps. So as you look out in the future, when you get out there, it may be that Tacoma is interested in essence, an exchange or buying water from Cascade at certain times of the year and providing water to Cascade at other times of the year. So when they talk about sharing lake taps, they're the only ones that also have talked about sharing the costs of lake taps. And that is a significant issue when you look to the future. Otherwise, it will be only Cascade paying for all those costs related to lake taps.
Yeah, I think that's great because, you know, to me, having a willing partner is always the most important part because you can work through anything if you're willing to work in partnership. My last question, on page 5, where we show the 2006 forecast and then the projected demand, how frequently do we go back and revisit the forecast? I'm just trying to get a sense where we got a zigzag line up until 2019 or 2020 or today, and then we've got kind of a straight line. How frequently do we make those adjustments?
Well, we're actually going through it right now, and we've said to the board we're not going to have them make a decision in the fall until they have updated forecasts. And we've got the latest population estimates from OFM and from the Puget Sound Council of Governments. So we've got both of those now. We're taking a look at them and updating what the demand curve looks like and see what the implications may be of that, so that by the time we request a decision from the board, they will have that information available to them.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor Malakoutian.
Thank you so much. Thank you for a great presentation. I appreciate all of you, and thank you for the leadership of both Councilmember Stoke and Hamilton and Lee and all of the previous council member. I just have one quick question. If you go back to the first slide 8.
I'm not going to live that down, am I?
No. Has there been any study that shows the environmental impact of the construction of these two pipelines? Because and have that been in a because I think if you go with Seattle, the yellow pipeline should be built. If we go with Tacoma, that is the pipeline. Has there been any environmental impact of long term of building all of these transmission and?
Only in a very preliminary sense when these were integrated into our transmission and system plans. Once we're given guidance here, we will begin the environmental process both on this decision with regard to contracting, but then as we move into planning, we still need to complete the analysis of each corridor, and that would include the environmental review. So it's been limited to date.
The one issue that you should know is when you look at the central segment that runs from the Tacoma pipeline up just past Seattle's Lake Youngs, we already own about 85 to 95% of the easements and right-of-ways. Those were purchased right after Lake Tapps was purchased, and so those right-of-ways are already in Cascade ownership. And so there isn't going to be a lot of ownership issues that we're going to have to deal with for that central segment. And in fact, those parts that aren't owned by Cascade are either owned by the city of Seattle or King County. So that whole right-of-way is pretty accessible. And the one thing that we would really, to be honest, in the long run, the best solution for the region is to only have to build that central segment and to connect to the Seattle supply line and use the existing infrastructure that's in place, which makes all the sense in the world rather than constructing a northern segment and then doing that. So we still believe that that may be doable, and in other states they have passed mandatory wheeling rules. If we can't get to a negotiation with Seattle, I would be recommending to move forward and either get legislation or something else that would allow us to make that intertie and that connection. Because as you have raised the environmental issue, and since I used to run ecology and EPA, I have dealt with the environmental side of that and the impacts associated with those, and they can be significant and they can be problematic in any kind of construction. So the more you can do to minimize that, the better.
Thank you so much.
Okay, Councilmember Noonhouse.
Thank you for the briefing, and thanks again to Councilmember Stokes and Hamilton for their great work on this. I too was on Cascade back in 2018,
Oh,
so.
sorry.
Anyways, no, that's, really appreciate the comments by my colleagues. I just had a couple of quick questions, generally favorable towards the Tacoma option, but said a couple interesting things. So, Seattle's, I guess, hesitancy to look for a regional solution struck me as kind of interesting, because wouldn't it be better to link all the water systems rather than build another system for, doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to me. But then you also followed it up saying that Seattle might be willing to help us out with the north transmission pipe for Tacoma option. So if they're not interested in that, why would they be interested in helping us with that, if I understood you correctly?
Right. One would hope it would be their fiduciary interest, I guess. We pay Seattle about $25 million a year right now for water. By 2040, that'll be more like $40 million a year, and then it will go away. And if they're still sitting on capacity in their pipes or supply capacity, that's lost revenue that then they will need to bear along with their other wholesale customers.
Oh, okay.
So our thought was, if a wheeling arrangement could be arranged on attractive terms, it would offset some of that revenue loss.
Okay.
It would be a new source of revenue. It would be using what would otherwise be idle capacity in their system, and could be an opportunity to regionalize. It has been intriguing and a little frustrating and a little perplexing that they're not more open to these interties. They've been active participants in the regional forum, which includes Tacoma and Everett, as well as King County utilities. And yet this idea of interconnecting the systems is not only of no interest to them, they're undertaking a supply study right now that contemplates new sources of supply but neglects a connection to Everett, a connection to Tacoma, looking at Lake Tapps or looking at the Snohomish River water right that Woodinville owns as potential sources, which are all major potential sources. So we honestly don't have an answer for that question, other than they've been consistent at the table that they perceive no value in that connection.
I think the other challenge is the 40-year extension. When they talked about that, they said, well, and then we'll have to regionalize supply for you to be able to get the 40-year extension. And we said, well, yeah, but it's not part of any of your plans now for supply. And they said, well, basically, we want to control that, number one. And number two, just to be blatantly honest, they don't like Cascade very well. They don't mind the individual members.
I appreciate you being blunt,
but they don't like Cascade. And if you look at the 40-year extension, they said we won't give that to Cascade. We'll only give it to individual members. I've had the conversation with them. I've had the conversation on regionalization, because it makes total sense to me. And I was over there for 7 years. Yeah. It made sense to me when I was there. It made sense to me now that you would really like to look at a regional solution. I think your point's really well taken, and I can't explain why they're not interested, to be honest.
And then just for my education too, so what is the likelihood, given, as Councilmember Lee mentioned, the excess supply of high-quality water in the region right now between Everett, Seattle, and Tacoma, what is the tipping point that we would exercise and want to get going on making Lake Tapps a reality, and the $2 billion price tag associated with it?
I could start. I think probably the biggest factor and the biggest unknown right now is climate change and how it's affecting capacity in our watersheds. All of Seattle, both of Seattle's watersheds rely heavily on snowpack for storage. The reservoirs themselves are relatively small. If we have more and more winters with less and less snow, the yield of their system ultimately gets derated. They have less reliable supply than they thought. Tacoma's is more reliant on rainfall, and they have more active storage relative to their demands, but storage is still the primary constraint. I mean, as you can imagine, in the Pacific Northwest, water itself isn't the scarcity. It's water at the right times of year.
Right.
That is, particularly with an overlay of environmental interests like stream flows. So I think where we're heading with this is lake taps becomes an insurance policy for a while, but ultimately it could become a tool for managing or mitigating the impacts of climate change that's reduced the perceived yield of these other systems.
I think the tipping point is if it ever becomes a seller's market rather than a buyer's market. Right now, it's a buyer's market. Tacoma has a heck of a lot of water. They're willing to sell at a real reasonable price. If you paid attention, they lost a big pulp and paper facility down, and that was about 13 million gallons a day. So if you look at their demand curves, even when you put climate change in there, there's a significant amount of water. In essence, we're in the market right now, and it's kind of a buyer's market. Not with Seattle, but it is definitely with Tacoma. But if I look out in 20 or 25 years, then the buyer's market could be Everett. It could be, because it takes about an 8-mile extension from Woodinville to the Everett system, and you can basically run water south. It could be Seattle again. It could be Tacoma. Tacoma's already talked about permanent supply, besides way beyond the extension we're doing now. So if we can keep if Cascade can keep positioning itself so when they come to a decision point, they are careful and make it a buyer's market decision point, I think you may put off pretty much forever lake taps. And if not, then you still have that as an insurance policy and you can't be taken advantage of because you can always go off and build lake taps.
Okay, thank you.
Great comments and questions. So it's interesting to me that in 20 years, Bellevue's population grew by 5%, but you look at the region's water consumption has gone down during that time. So that's curious to me, and I hope makes me think of conservation methods that we could be using as a community. I know that, as Councilmember Zahn mentioned, we've been paying for blocks of water, and we don't necessarily use them. And if we're going to be paying for the water that we use now, that needs to be reflected in our billing that we do with our residents. And I think it would be really wise for our city to come up with some awareness of the new billing system and how we can affect our water rates.
Well, you really raised a really interesting point. Since 1990, population growth's been 35 or 40% in Seattle's service area, their whole service area, and their use has dropped 30 to 35%. So it used to peak at about 320 million gallons in a day in the summer. The last 10 years, the peak day has been about 210. Radical change since the early 1990s. And the one thing that Cascade will be working with its members on is all about peak use. Because when we keep talking about the water use, Seattle's what you would call normal water use, January, February, when you're not watering and doing other things, is about 105 million gallons a day. It's about half. And if you look at Cascade, it's probably 15, 16 million gallons a day. So when you plan for water, is it for the peak? And if you plan for peak and you have to invest for peak, you have to make big investments for that. If you can push that peak down, it extends for long periods of time the need to make investments.
Oh, that's great. That's a really good point. Thank you. So the pros I see of going with the Tacoma, the cost savings, it's a phased contract, right? You pay for what you use. We just talked about that. Seems like Bellevue's going to have better bargaining power with the Tacoma line, and it seems to me there'll be more seismic resiliency. Can you speak to that? Because that, to me, seems to be one of the biggest risks in the future.
Yeah, the seismic issue, we're going through that now at Woodinville, since the Woodinville utility sits right on top of one of the seismic lines. The biggest risk, if you had a subduction quake, and a big subduction quake, it really doesn't matter. It's going to be pretty much all of Western Washington. However, the surface quakes are pretty much going to be they're isolated one at a time. And so being able to have a regionalized system so that if it's the Seattle fault or it's the one of the the fault that's on the San Juan fault, or if it's one of the other ones, you have the resiliency of having the interties. If you don't have that and you are isolated within your own system, you're going to be, if you have a big enough earthquake, some of your residents are going to be out of water for a month to a month and a half. I mean, they just will be, and there's no way you're physically going to get the water back. If you have those interties and you can move water regionally, you can cut that time significantly. So it does add to resiliency for earthquakes significantly.
And as a new pipeline, it's going to be designed to a better standard, seismic standard relative to the existing pipelines. So it's much more likely to survive.
Great.
And intertying more watersheds, whichever ones are coming back online, we can limp by for a broader area quicker.
And just as a side, the council just recently voted in funding for an emergency water program. So we're looking at that as well. Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for your time.
We are going to take a break till 10 after. Okay, we're going to resume our meeting. If I may ask for quiet in the galley here, Mr. Wallace. Mr. Wallace. Okay, great. So our second study session item is the Bike Bellevue update. City Manager, would you like to give an introduction?
Thank you, Mayor. I'll give a little bit of a longer introduction, even though I know we're going to have a good coverage. But as council is aware, this initiative envisions the implementation of low-cost, rapid build bicycle facilities on existing streets in downtown Wilburton and Bellred neighborhoods. And in March of last year, council directed staff to work with the Transportation Commission to prepare and submit implementation recommendations for the Bike Bellevue program, and specifically for the $4.5 million CIP funding that's been allocated to the project. So the staff over the year has been very intentional to provide technical analysis to the commission to undertake very robust engagement efforts that have resulted in, as you have been hearing, a large range of interest and comments. So the intent of the study session tonight is to briefly revisit the history of the Bike Bellevue program, update the council and the community on a wide range of input received, and importantly, to seek council consideration to provide further direction and guidance to the Transportation Commission and the staff in support of the commission as the commission works to develop recommendations for implementation of the Bike Bellevue corridors. So joining from Transportation Department, we have Director Andrew Singalakis, Assistant Director Paula Stevens, and then online, I believe, we have Kevin McDonald, Principal Transportation Planner. And so with that, I will turn that over to Andrew. Thank you.
Well, thank you, City Manager Carlson, Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor Malakutian, and the rest of the council. And as Diane mentioned, we're here tonight after a brief hiatus that we had for Bike Bellevue. We're here a year ago. We got the referral of the body of work to go to the Transportation Commission to work through different alternatives. And if you recall, part of that was a recommendation that would go from the Transportation Commission to the Transportation Director. But with a caveat there as well that, we would come back and check in with the council, depending on the level of interest that's out there. When the draft concept guide came out, it was pretty apparent that many of the 11 corridors involved the removal of a vehicular travel lane for bike lanes. And this really generated quite a bit significant public interest, many people in support, many people in opposition. And given the interest, we really felt the need to bring this back to council for an update and further direction. And I'd like to remind everybody that we're mid-process with the Transportation Commission. They have not prioritized projects yet. That is yet to happen. And as Diane mentioned earlier too, we've got about a quarter of the funding available to do the 11 corridors. So there's some prioritization that's going to need to occur and still occur with the Transportation Commission. But we tonight really would like to tell you about what we're hearing from the public and also to review the history of the project and tell you what we've heard and then provide a staff recommendation that could provide additional guidance for the decision-making of the Transportation Commission. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Paula.
Okay, and I hope our slides are numbered correctly. I think they are, we'll see. So, as we know, there's been a long history of bicycle infrastructure policy making, planning, implementation, and financial decisions that have been made. And some of those significant milestones are shown on the slide here before you. Notably, beginning in 2009, there was the development and creation of a pedestrian bicycle transportation plan. And that plan consolidated disparate legacy plans and policies and corridor ideas and various studies into a single document that included over 400 potential projects throughout the city and ranked them high, medium, and low, and gave some thought to what future infrastructure planning around bicycle facilities might look like as we progress forward. In 2015, the council made the decision at that time that what staff didn't need to do is revisit that 2009 plan. What we needed to do as your staff was actually start implementing some projects. And so that was a reaffirmation of the 2009 plan with direction to staff to get some work done. In 2016, the Transportation Commission, based on the direction they received from council in 2015, developed something called a Bicycle Rapid Implementation Program. And that was a framework for finding ways to creatively implement bicycle infrastructure on a more rapid basis rather than simply relying on capital projects and programming to ensure that we were getting bicycle facilities out there into the community. The same year, council and the community actually voted in the Neighborhood Safety, Connectivity, and Congestion Levy that provided funding. A portion of the funding goes to bicycle infrastructure implementation. And through that levy, we've been able to implement about 59 miles of bicycle infrastructure spread throughout the community. So there's work going on and there's progress being made. What we realized, however, through community conversations and through council's guidance is that more work was aspirational and actually was tangible. More work could be done. So in 2017 and 2019, the Transportation Commission, with council's direction, implemented two projects, one on 108th Avenue Northeast and one on Main Street, that used the existing infrastructure out in the community to implement rapid implementation facilities, which did require the repurposing of travel lanes within the existing right-of-way of the street. Moving forward to 2021 and 2022, as has been mentioned in community or public comment tonight, council has set aside, identified $4.5 million to cover bicycle infrastructure implementation here in the project area that is downtown Wilburton, the Bell Red area. Now, as has already been mentioned, and we know from the agenda memo, that isn't anywhere near what would be required to implement everything that's part of Bike Bellevue, which is the important prioritization conversation and why part of the reason we're here tonight. And then fast forwarding to 2023 is when council actually initiated Bike Bellevue. And I'll speak more to that in just a moment. In addition to all the activities, all the decision-making policies, plans, and financial decisions that have been made up to this point in time, two additional layers of consideration were added to how staff and the Transportation Commission are thinking about Bike Bellevue. One of them is the adoption of the Mobility Implementation Plan, which represents really a paradigmatic shift about how we're thinking about infrastructure mobility and mobility options for the community. What's important that's contained in the Mobility Implementation Plan as it relates to bicycle infrastructure is something called level of traffic stress. And you'll see that in the agenda memo, and you'll see that in this voluminous design concepts guide, if you were to pick up a copy of it. And the purpose there is to better ensure that the bicycle facilities that we're implementing are safer, more connected, and they are more likely to be used by people of all ages and all abilities. So that's the Cliff Notes version of what bicycle level of traffic stress is. And it has a lot to do with the volume of traffic and the speeds that those vehicles are moving through along a corridor. Another tie is to our Vision Zero work. Shown here on the right is the cover of the 2023 Vision Zero Action Plan. Council initiated action described as Vision Zero to get us moving more toward zero serious collisions and deaths within the community on our infrastructure. The most vulnerable users, as we know, are people who are on foot and on bicycles and on other wheeled conveyances. As has already been mentioned, I won't linger here, we have $4.5 million to do Bike Bellevue, to implement projects within our project area. A notable excerpt from the CIP that was established is that this, and this will be a theme, is that the network should be safe, it should be connected, it should be comfortable for for people of all ages and all abilities. One thing that we had aspired to achieve that was called out in that CIP document is that we would implement 3 priority projects by 2024. We aren't there yet. We're working on it, but we haven't gotten to that point. And then March, almost a year ago to the date, 2023, we appeared before council, Transportation Department staff did, and the action taken by council that night included approving 8 project principles for Bike Bellevue that would guide staff's and the commission's work. You also affirmed the project area and the corridors that we would look at through the Bike Bellevue process. And you directed the Transportation Commission, with staff's help, to prepare a recommendation to the Transportation Director for implementation. And here on this slide is the project area that you looked at that night. We have added the corridors that are now numbered in the Design Concepts Guide for Bike Bellevue. So those corridor annotations are also shown on this graphic. And the 11 corridors are what we are looking at so far with Bike Bellevue. The principles that council settled on that night to guide the Transportation Commission and staff's work, I'm going to touch on those here in a moment. But the preamble for those is shown here on this slide. Again, the themes of connectivity of the bicycle network, ensuring that the network is safe, that it enhances livability, supports economic development, that there's an equity lens and consideration in the work that we're doing, and that we're better meeting and serving the mobility needs of people all ages and all abilities. These next two slides show those 8 principles that council approved that night. I'm not going to read them in detail. They're in your agenda memo. They are safety, connectivity, comfort, evaluation. And then the following 3 are coordination, partnerships, and engagement. The last one is equity, and that is a principle that council added to the 7 that staff proposed on the 27th of March last year. So where are we now? Well, the Transportation Commission so far, since we initiated work through the commission, has had 7 meetings. The meetings are shown there, just for your information on the slide. Since the project was initiated in May through November, we have spent the bulk of the time, the commission has, listening to community input. All the meetings, of course, have a time spent for public input and public comment. We've also spent time introducing the Transportation Commission to this draft Design Concepts Guide, which is when the community really began to realize what Bike Bellevue represents and what it means practically speaking, and that is the repurposing of travel lanes on every corridor with the exception of 2. So that's the realization the community began to develop about what this project really means. So we spent time reviewing and refining that draft concepts guide based on additional information and additional analysis and community input as well as input we're getting from folks like the fire department, parks, various other folks within the city, and some of our partners, transit partners, and others outside the community as well. So it's still draft because it's going to be a document that will continue to evolve until the project is complete. And we've also spent time with the Transportation Commission. We introduced a draft public engagement plan. We have revisited that. We got Commission's approval for that, and then we've been revisiting that periodically to update them where we are with the public engagement work, what we still have left to do. As Andrew mentioned, we're midpoint with the Commission. There's still more public engagement work to do, but we've been reporting back to them on what we've been doing and what we've been hearing. And then December 14th was an interesting night for the Transportation and Commission and staff. Commission held a special session prior to their regularly scheduled meeting, during which they asked a series of, I think it was about 60 questions of staff of a technical nature. This document is very technical in nature. They wanted to lift up the hood and see what's going on underneath there and better understand what it is that they are being asked to consider. So we spent an hour and a half with the Commission that night answering their questions. We didn't go all the way through. They're eager and interested in having time with us to finish up that Q&A session. And it was well received by both the Commission members and the folks who were in the audience. And then later that night, rather than have the regular session, our Commission members, with the wise input of our Commission Chair, Chair Stash, said, let's set aside the agenda for the night and just listen to public comment. And so that's what they did the night of December 14. 59 people wanted to comment. We had standing room only. People were sitting on the floor. People were spilling out into the hallway. Staff members were in a room nearby so that we weren't taking up seats in the room. And 59 people wanted to speak, and all 59 people had an opportunity that night. That doesn't mean that we aren't still getting public input. You're receiving public input probably every day. I saw some more emails today. Through the end of February 2024, which had to be the cutoff date because we had to prepare the agenda memo, we received, by our count, we're doing our best to make sure it's accurate, over 1,000 emails from folks. The expression of support, the expression of consternation, lack of support, if you will, objection, are noted here on this slide. We are also receiving, and still continue to receive, a form letter that people have taken the opportunity to forward. And then the themes that we're hearing through that public engagement and that those emails specifically cover the themes that you see on this slide, and they're in alphabetical order. They're not prioritized by the number of comments or anything like that. They really focus on what you see here: themes of access and mobility, city priorities and how we're investing money, community health, data analysis, big theme. You're hearing that tonight. Economics and the economy, safety and vehicle capacity and efficiency, notably. Another public engagement tool that we leveraged for the first time, and we've learned a lot from going through that exercise, is something called the Conveo online comment tool. The tool was open for 2 months, and it gave people an opportunity to take a look at what we see one-dimensionally in this draft concepts guide. It's a very detailed, sort of engineering-esque platform, a lot of detail about design concepts and buffer treatments and paint and posts and all those sorts of things. And so folks, if they wanted to take a look at that information online and have an opportunity to comment and better understand what's being proposed in Bike Bellevue, folks had that opportunity for 2 months. And the themes of comment that we heard back through that tool are shown here on this slide. And some of the same things from the email comment: access, mobility. More notably here than just email comment is concern about conflict points. We heard some of that tonight. Driveways, location of driveways, and that sort of thing. Would the facilities be safe, and how can we make them safe? Roadway design and alignment, of course, it comes up in a tool like that when all that detail is out there. And then again, comments in support and both in opposition. And that was from the Conveo tool only. So we arrive at for Council's consideration tonight. This is shown in your agenda memo. There are a couple of options that we have here on the slide for you. One is alternative direction, which is always an option. And then also to consider directing the Transportation Commission to develop a recommendation for each of the proposed corridors, the 11 corridors, with one of the following, based on one of the following categories for each corridor. And I'll just walk through each one of them. They include corridors that would not require travel lane repurposing, that the city would program and implement as soon as possible.
They also include corridors that would repurpose the travel lane and would first be evaluated as a trial or a demonstration project using criteria that would be developed by the Transportation Commission. And we do have experience with that in conjunction with the implementation of the 108th Avenue bicycle project. The Transportation Commission did develop some criteria for analysis during the demonstration period of that project. So we do have that to rely on. So it wouldn't necessarily be a starting point for the commission if you so choose to direct them that way. There's also an option to implement as permanent infrastructure projects rather than rapid implementation design. The fourth option would be corridors that would be deferred to and incorporated into the next update of the Transportation Facilities Plan, which is in the near term. We are initiating conversations with the Transportation Commission coming up very soon, and so the cycle for that next update is nearly upon us. And then the last option there would be corridors that would no longer be considered. And that's where we are, so thank you.
Okay. So before we get started in going around letting everybody make comments and ask questions, I think what we're asking the council is to provide information for the Transportation Commission to consider in their recommendation and/or directions to staff. Is that right? Okay, accurate. So, we will start with Councilmember Neuenhuis, who is the liaison to Transportation Commission.
Thank you so much, Mayor, and I want to thank Transportation Commission first and foremost on this for all the time they've spent on Bike Bellevue and listening to the many divergent opinions. Thanks for the recap and the briefing tonight. And it should be noted that the Transportation Commission not yet completed its process, as you rightly pointed out. There's still a lot of outreach yet to come, so this is by no means one and done. Also really appreciate the engagement by our community. They have been listening, and I've been listening and reading very closely all the feedback and suggestions from residents, from cyclists, from businesses, nonprofit organizations, and all about providing bike infrastructure and specifically the rapid implementation. I had the pleasure of riding with the Eastside Urbanism Group, which is here tonight, and through the Bellevue corridor. So that was another great way to understand their perspectives and their concerns and what they're interested in. And it was just part of my process as well. As I know many of my colleagues also did that ride. Maybe not all together. Councilmember Zahn was with me, but I know others did that same ride. So I appreciate all my colleagues for taking the time to do that. And I also want to say this conversation about Bike Bellevue at times has gotten a little heated, maybe unnecessarily so, but I always appreciate the passion that Bellevue residents always bring and how engaged they always are. But I think this one thing I think we just need to kind of keep in mind is that despite perhaps our differences of opinion, I haven't heard anyone say we want more bike infrastructure in the city of Bellevue. I think we all do. Clearly, we might differ on approach and implementation and the priorities, but I think everyone understands all the benefits that come with bike facilities in the city of Bellevue, as you rightly mentioned, be it economic development, being one of them that quite often we forget about. But study after study have shown that a lot of businesses do see a benefit to having more bike infrastructure in and around them, and it just improves our community in general. So I haven't heard anything but that. So, but I also think we need to be realistic about how much we can prioritize, given that, as you mentioned, we only have a quarter of the funding needed right now. I like the work that's been done by staff and the commission, but certainly have some suggestions, and I think tonight clarifying some guidance for staff and the commission. And I hope that our guidance as a council this evening helps prioritize major projects as well, like Spring Boulevard, which we deeply want to see that connection because it's sorely needed. And it might come at a price tag, but bottom line, we need that bike infrastructure, and we need it as soon as possible. However, certainly I've heard from numerous residents and businesses that the real sticking point, as you mentioned earlier too, about the 6 miles of arterial road lanes, where the majority of the new growth will go over the next 20 years. It's a legitimate point, especially when considering that one of our policies in the comprehensive plan is to quote, aggressively plan, manage, and expand transportation investments to reduce congestion. Additionally, as a lifelong cyclist myself, who deeply wants to see more bike facilities in our community, I don't think the removal of a lane necessarily meets our goals of providing a safe and comfortable experience for the rider as it's not used by cyclists. And those were two of our principles, as you noted there, safety and comfort. Paint and post is not protected, and I've got grave concerns about some of the safety of cyclists in our community because of it, especially on Bell Red, which we just recently went on that ride. Drivers are driving very quickly on that road. Paint and post is not going to protect them. And again, providing a safe and comfortable experience for the rider is paramount for me. Not only are cars going at high rates, but there's so many turn-ins for businesses as well throughout that corridor, which could cause congestion and also, again, put cyclists in peril and in harm's way. We also heard from, specifically I did, reaching out to first responders. We also heard from Overlake Hospital as well about bike lanes must not come with a reduction in driving lanes through the affected areas due to the potential slowing of ambulances and fire response, police response to the urban core. So this solution, might meet our short-term goals, but I don't think it meets our long-term goals, as it doesn't provide us safe bike lanes that everyone feels comfortable and will not have concerns using it and will get great traction from residents and visitors alike. Personally, I don't know how I can endorse a plan that I wouldn't feel comfortable with my wife or my daughter riding. But for other residents, it would be okay. My values just don't dictate that I could do that. So, and additionally, I really appreciate the Bellevue Chamber took the initiative as well to do a survey on top of all the outreach and engagement that we did. And that showed that residents, I've got the numbers in front of me here, said 70% of respondents oppose reducing 6 miles of arterial roadways in downtown Bellevue, Wilburton and Bell Red from 2 lanes down to 1, and 72% of respondents oppose replacing road lanes with bike lanes. So where I kind of land on this from my perspective is let's move forward immediately with the corridors that do not require any removal of vehicular lanes or arterial lanes. As stated during oral communications, there's already 4 ready to go. So let's get moving on that as quickly as possible. Let's expand the Bellevue Bike Network. Let's focus on completing and making connections to the regional bike corridors. Let's direct the Transportation Commission and staff to develop a recommendation for each Bike Bellevue corridor. I do like those buckets that you're suggesting. I do have heartburn over B. I think that is one that we should look at just eliminating, because I think the clearer we can be in terms of the direction we're giving to the commission, the quickly they can give us feedback and the quicker that we can develop and get going on this plan.
Eliminate what?
B.
Okay,
Thank you.
okay. I tried to write all that down. I'm sure you did as well.
Yeah, and then lastly, I just wanted to say, also want to make sure we make it very clear that we want to see a completion of the regional bike corridor established in that 2009 pedestrian bike plan that you mentioned earlier as well. So with that, I'll end my comments there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Very similar to Councilwoman Newhouse, I also appreciate all of the community and the stakeholders' engagement. It's amazing how much they care about their city. I am a strong supporter of Bike Bellevue initiative, and I do believe that we are lacking a safe, connected network for bike lanes. And based on your graph, we started this around 1993 in that chart. So that's 30 years that we are trying to do something, and we still don't have any safe, connected network of bike lanes. And I think the urgency is right now. And to me, what you are proposing is kind of a reset button, like kind of not ignoring all of the efforts that have been done. So just in the page that we are looking at, I recommend that not take number A back to the Transportation Commission. We already know what those corridors are that doesn't require any travel lane repurposing. So we could just go and start them right now. There is no need to go back to the Transportation Commission to go another 6 months of public study and everything. And I think no one is going to disagree with that. There are some corridors that we can just go and implement. So I recommend bring that A out and let's just start that. Hopefully they are, let me just ask you this question. Are those corridors that is mentioned in number A that doesn't require any load purposing can be achieved in our budget 4.3 or 4.8 million?
Yeah, it comes out to about, I did a calculation, about 2.6 million.
3.6 million?
Yeah.
Great, so we can just do that with the budget right now ASAP. And I think the rest can go back to the Transportation Commission. I don't think, I agree that we should find a creative design solution that creates safe, protected bike lanes without needing to repurpose the travel lanes. I agree with that. I am on the Planning Commission. I know how much density. I am the liaison of Planning Commission. I'm not on it anymore. Anyway, I know how much density we are adding, especially in Bellevue, Wilburton, and I know already traffic is there, and I know bike lanes also maybe reduce traffic a little bit. So I don't recommend to remove B completely out of there, but I think the priority should be come up with a solution that provide a very safe bike lane that doesn't need any repurposing travel lanes. But again, if there is one piece, I'm not talking about Bellevue, but if we try and we gather data and our data shows that that piece, very small piece as one option, if we even purpose some travel lanes, our data, and based on the criteria that you mentioned that we are going to evaluate, shows nothing after 3 months sampling, I don't have any problem with that. But my last comment would be, I think we should not waste any more time. There shouldn't be a 30 years council from now that is still debating a safe, well-connected bike lanes for the community that we have in Bellevue. Thank you, Mayor.
All right, thank you. So I'm going to go ahead and then we'll have Council Member Hamilton, Lee, Stokes, and then Zahn. I too appreciate the work that the Transportation Commission has done with all the input that they've taken and all the thought that they put into this, and they know that they still have a lot of work to do. But I'll tell you something, this morning I was in a neighboring community to Bellevue that has not prioritized bike routes. They have no bike lane on a very busy main road. They just have a shoulder. And people like to bike this road because it's scenic and it's interesting, but it's very risky. And then this morning, I'm watching parents trying to walk their kids to school on the shoulder of the road with people speeding by. And I'm thinking, this is what it looks like when you don't invest in ped bike infrastructure. And I'm really proud of the city that not only are we choosing to make this investment, we have dedicated funding for it. And when I first got on the council, and then before I got on the council, I used to see that all the ped bike programs get taken off the budget at the last minute. At the very end, you have to cut something. It was always those programs. So there was always this desire to do it, but there wasn't the funding. And now we have funding. We can do it. But what I'm really interested in, as somebody who commutes on bike myself, and I started doing that 10 years ago when I got on the council, because I thought, how can I make a decision if I don't know what it feels like to ride my bike in the city? Well, I know what it feels like, and I have strong feelings about what's missing here. We need complete routes. We have disconnected routes. And so my priority is connecting what we already have. I've said this before, the only thing worse than no bike infrastructure is partial bike infrastructure. So I really want to ask the Transportation Commission to look at what we have and how do we make those final connections? How do we get a complete safe north-south route? We should have 3 of those really. And how do we get safe east-west routes? So here are my priorities. I think 100th Street, that's a very dangerous street for bikes, and it's a good north-south route, so that should be addressed. 12th Street to 100th, that's kind of a no-brainer. Northeast Spring Boulevard, definitely. Completing that. 136th to the 520 Trail, that's a piece that's missing. Southeast 8th, that's a popular route, and that is very dangerous. Again, there's only a shoulder there. So I think, you can take that east and get by the International School into Kelsey Creek area, and that's a safe way to get around. Northeast 2nd heading west should be addressed. I'd love the city to look at Lost Meadow Trail, just by the botanical gardens that can take you to Southeast 4th. That used to be a route I could take until they did the housing development down there. So that should be renewed. And then I really hope that as an innovative city, we can look outside the box and find a way to get from downtown to Crossroads. We just don't, you either have to go north or you have to go south. We don't have anything going directly. And if we're gonna save money on other projects, it'd be great to get easements in there or do something that gives us a safe, fun, dedicated ped bike route all the way to Crossroads. And in terms of Bell Red, so when I look at Main Street and where Amazon just built, and that beautiful, for one block, you have that beautiful bike corridor that's protected. And I think the developer put that in, right? And they did that without taking out a car lane. Is it possible to expect that on Bell Red Road as that gets redeveloped, that as people develop, we ask them to put something like that in instead of going into the road, that it goes onto the property?
You'd have to have, a mapping for development review to occur. It would take a long time to do that, though, absolutely.
If you would like to see that happen, the first thing to do is ensure that there is something, a line on a map, something that's approved, something that provides direction and certainty, so that we can actually begin to request that infrastructure support, funding, back of curb implementation from developers. Right now, that doesn't exist on Bell Red Road.
Can you give us some guidance on how to do that? I don't know if there's interest from other council members too. I'm seeing some head nods. I'm seeing 1, 2, 3, 4, okay. So if we could get some guidance on how we might proceed with that, I think that would save the city a lot of money. And in the meantime, I would really like to focus on a really good route. And I think the Spring District, the Spring Boulevard segment is great, but we still can't get to Crossroads. Mm-hmm. And even with Bell Red, we still can't get to Crossroads. So we've got to find some safe route for people to take.
And I should mention as well that, through the process, we ended up getting an awful lot of really good, interesting comments and proposals. And one of the things that, looking on that list for number D, could be projects that get fed into our next update of our TFP. Mm-hmm. And to kind of frame it that way, the Transportation Commission's a good venue for that.
Yes. So yeah, so that's something else to request recommended routes to add to that.
Yep.
Okay, great. That's all for me. Okay, Councilmember Hamilton.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the presentation, for sure. Appreciate all the briefings we've had and all the communication we've had around Bike Bellevue. Also want to thank the two of you for the leadership that you've shown. I think you deserve a lot of credit for keeping Bike Bellevue on track. to meet the goal of adding bike infrastructure that we all know we want and need. So thank you. Well done. Also want to thank the many folks that have actively collaborated to create an implementation recommendation that we can move forward with. You know, and I want to be sure too, you know, we're not at a place where we're thinking about if to move forward with Bike Bellevue. That's already been decided. I think there's some concern that Bike Bellevue could get completely off the rails, and that's not going to happen. I also too, you know, really appreciate the guiding principles that helped direct the Transportation Commission initially. I think council did a great job in putting those together. I know if I would have been here at the time, I would have voted to take that action as well. So I think sending this back to the Transportation Commission really is the right approach here. We need some more in-depth analysis, some community engagement, and then updating the implementation plan. Again, you know, really solid project principles that are guiding this going forward. I think as we go back to the Transportation Commission, I'd like to see us refocus on a couple of those. The evaluation principle, I think, is really important. I don't think we've done that quite well enough, and I think we would like another shot at it. I want to make sure that it's been mentioned previously that we look at other uses. We're supporting all modes. So transit, emergency vehicles, folks that have to drive, you know, they need to be prioritized, I think, as we continue to implement Bike Bellevue. We have to maximize all modes. We've already decided on that, and I think that's an important priority to maintain. Also, too, just as a part of that evaluation process, I want to make sure that we're really careful with the data. And there's been an effort in the past to reframe that data. I think that was a mistake. I think asking the Transportation Commission to do some more work to ensure that we have reliable data is really important. We all need to know that we are starting from the same basis. I think, too, the engagement process, that's one where I really want to see us double down on. I think we've talked to an appropriate wide range of stakeholders. I think that's been really effective. I think the issue that I've seen where there has been some preferential treatment that's given to a subset of stakeholders, I think was a mistake. And I think going back to the Transportation Commission is a way for us to correct that lapse. So I would say, again, you know, your leadership has been really helpful. The two of you have been great. I think that what I would like to see is that, you know, I like this list that we have here. I also would like to see an option that doesn't involve taking out any travel lanes. We heard earlier tonight that we've got the money that we could deploy that does just that. That was heard in public comment. We've heard from other community members, including Steve Fantle, who is an active bike advocate, presented us with an option where we could deploy that money and we're not taking out any travel lanes. We should start with that. We should consider that. There's no harm, and there's, I think, a lot to be gained. I want to see, too, that, you know, I think if we can do this, we can move off of defense. Everybody seems to be on defense right now, and I think we have an opportunity to all move to offense. And we can deploy this money and we can build out that bike infrastructure, and we can plan for a day where we're able to add more revenue and continue to build this out. So I think that there is a good group of folks who want to see that happen, and they represent all of the stakeholder interests. It was mentioned earlier, we're talking about Spring Boulevard. I would love to see Spring Boulevard and funding the completion of Spring Boulevard really prioritized. If there is a way to bring that online by 2030, to include that in the Bike Bellevue plan, I think that's a huge step forward. And I think if we include it in the plan, there's a lot more energy behind making sure that it occurs. So I would like to do that as well. I think having some demonstration options, some trials. Again, if we're not taking out travel lanes, there's no harm in trying those things. That will be another option to collect some data. So I think that would be, I would definitely be in favor of that. I think continuing to look at East Trail and the Grand Connection Crossing. Those are critical parts. I want to make sure that we keep those two things in mind. And I have a question too. I'm just kind of curious. So we send this back to transportation. They're going to do their work. Then what? Does it come back to us? I mean, what's the process after they complete their work?
The way I understand it, it's still coming back to the transportation director.
Okay.
But I would always offer it up back to council before doing that as well, so.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm glad to help continue to move this forward. Having a good connected bike infrastructure is super important. There's universal support for it, and I'm certainly in favor of it. So thank you.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Lee.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a lot of work that you've done, a lot of work in front of us. And I hear that, we need, all the multimodal systems to make our system work. I believe we agree to that. We actually did the rapid implementation program for bikes, a few years back, you mentioned. And we did it, okay? And we should have learned something from that project. It's not just a slam dunk. We learned, some conversations, inputs, so on, so on. So I'm just looking at the policy itself. It says very clearly, safety is an important element. And there are many other things too that's included, but I just want to point. Some may be very consistent, some may not be. So I always believe that the devil is in the detail. It's easy to provide a policy, but it's very difficult for the staff, to implement what it is. You have to depend on a lot of information, a lot of timing, a lot of needs at the moment. Deputy Mayor mentioned that, it's been on the map a long time. Bellevue has a real healthy bike plan way back when, but we have not connected it, north, south, east, west. We realize that. So we also been looking at it, trying to figure out how to make it work. But we have problems with roads as well for a long time. It has never been fixed, and we're still lacking, we're still short. So what we want to do, we want to do everything if possible. If we have unlimited money, if we have unlimited road, unlimited space, we can do everything. We can do everything separated. We can build as many roads as we want, build as many bicycle lanes as we want, as many pedestrian corridors as we want. But it's not possible, okay? It's just dreaming. It's not real policy. So the policy's there. We're going to figure out how to make it work, how to do it realistically. How much money do we have? What's the timeliness? Do we have space to do that? And that's challenging, very challenging. That's what you have to go through. That's what Transportation Commission have to look at. And we can criticize. At the end of which say, no, it's not. I appreciate Mayor's suggestion, recommendation. Those are very good recommendations. But each of us have lots of recommendations. I don't want to throw mine on. It's just not realistic. So it has to be realistic, has to be something that we can do. I believe that one of the key that people are concerned about is the safety. If you put roads and put bikes together, so you say, well, we don't want roads, so we want bikes. And other people say, we want no bike on the roads. That is in conflict. And I don't think we can resolve that at the moment, unless you have data, unless you have realistic options, what it is we can do. So the easiest solution, like the Deputy Mayor said, well, if we don't interfere with the road, then take it away, that might be a ready, easy solution, okay? If you want to do that, I probably won't object to it. But anything else that represent potential conflict, we got to hold back. We got to be careful. We got to say safety is important, which means we have to consider the road's got to be there, the bike's going to be there. Are we going to put in bike and endanger the bicyclists? Well, in that sense, you're creating hazard for drivers as well. So I don't think we have a solution. I would like to have us looking at data, which one is really, come up with solutions we have. We talk about innovative solutions, innovative ideas. I don't know what it is. That's why we want to try. Maybe separate lane, separate grades. Then you don't have a conflict. I don't know. This is going to cost money. Are we going to spend it? I have no idea. So you have to do the study. You have to do analysis. But at this moment, we have only limited amount of money. We can do some things. I believe that we can only do it in a real clear, safe situation where there's no conflict. So, and I don't believe also by adding bicycle lane and then losing the transportation, need that cannot be met. Because if we need cars, we need lanes, people are going to be in the cars for the time being. I don't know when people are going to use cars, but we do know from the data we have, people do need cars, people need to drive, and then you have to keep the lanes in order to do that. So you are adding bike lane to it, okay? If it's safe, go ahead. But based on database information, doesn't seem to be safe. So that's why it's a dilemma. We say, well, one has to go. And I don't think that we know. I don't think it's fair. I would not support by getting rid of car lanes, for the benefit of bicyclists. Because one is suffering from the other. Who do I cite? Do I cite bicyclists? Do I cite motorists? We're not in a position to do that, right? Or I'd be probably citing more for less congestion on the road, because that's already the point that we have made. I think that makes sense, right? So we have lots of projects. I don't think we could do, we can do some, okay? But I don't think that we should just, because we have money, even $4.6 million, if it's even $13 million, just because we have money, we want to spend. No, we don't. We need to do the right thing. So my question to conclude is, what is the right thing? Okay, we need to tell the commission, I believe, I would like to, make sure we don't take one at the cost of the other, okay? We need to look at how can we accommodate both goals in a safe way without taking away, jeopardizing the other, people's use for the, we cannot say that we don't need more cars anymore. Maybe eventually, but not now. I don't think we can say we don't need roads anymore. We can tear it away. No, we need them, right? We need bicyclists too, yes. But let's figure out another way to do it. Let's be creative. Let's make it work. If we don't, let's work on it. I don't like the idea of testing, because when you're testing it, you're already creating a dangerous situation. I don't think it's a good thing. I'm not going to risk by testing it, riding bicycle, see if a car hits me or not. That does not make sense. Or taking the car away, because I don't know what result I get, maybe. So I think we can study that, understand that, and come up with the best solution. But safety is a consideration for me, and that's a principle, and not taking, from Peter to pay Paul, because you are creating unnecessary taking away from somebody else. That doesn't make sense. Because we heard from some people say, no, we hear from both sides. Both sides are important to us. Both sides are important to me. So you put me in a position which I can make a choice. So why do that? Let's wait until we know, right? We can do it fairly, equitably for everybody. So I would prefer to let the Transportation Commission know, let's take a look at the whole situation. And maybe some of them we can implement, that's fine, without creating any controversy. But the ones that create some concern, let's figure out what can we do to make it work. But do not forget the two principles, safety and also pitting one against the other. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Lee, I think you made a really good point.
Thanks.
That I hadn't really heard articulated quite, and I wonder if the rest of the council agrees that before you do a bike route that removes car lanes, that we get more data and we research it more. So I think that's not a bad point. Okay, Councilmember Stokes.
Yeah, thank you. I'm very excited actually with this conversation. I appreciate what Councilmember Neuenhouse said on this. I do want to talk about the very issue of the safety of with the lanes and all, and Councilmember Hamilton's and Mohammed Mose also. So this is it's very fascinating. I think we're coming to this whole conversation and the activity in the community has been very helpful, because it's have people on different sides, different issues and all, but we're all wanting to achieve success in this whole piece. And to address this issue right now of with the lanes and all, the fact of the matter is, we can go out there in the country, I know, and places around here, even up to Redmond, and get some ideas, and it has been done, can be done, and will be done if we do it right. So this is not I understand the concern. It's been a long time since I've ridden a bike, but I would not want to just get out there on Bellevue Road right now and run around like that. But I think it's something to look at. Councilmember Lee said and I agree, if he looks at it, we find out that we can't do it, there are ways to do it where necessary. Maybe it's a last resort or something, then he would be favorable. So that's one of the things that I think helped us with the conversations is people a little bit too worried about making those changes, not quite understanding what the whole piece is. So that's something we really need to work on. But that's just something here. I really appreciate the whole, what we have put together here, the things to go back to the commission and look at this. And I agree with the conversation so far has really been very, very good. And on the funding issue, yes, it is. We need a lot more money than we're talking about right here. But we do have that TDA thing that we could work. There are different ways, things we can do. And we can't, it's one of those things, if we really want to do it, we need to do it in something that really makes the city better. It actually increases the financial resources in the long run. We can do that. We just shouldn't say, well, we have $5 million, we'll do that, and then what do we don't know yet what we're going to do. I think, again, it's not necessarily the Transportation Commission would work on that, but I do believe that we have, this is a very, very important thing, and it's a very important thing to do now because we're suffering from having roads not redone and not worked on, and all this developments come. I mean, downtown has roads right now that was not built for, all of these huge buildings and everything. It's changed that so drastically. So what I'm saying is, I think we have come up with, and I think when we go through all of this, and I really believe that most of us are going to all work together on this because we're going for the same goals, that if we put this forward, and this is really something we want to do, that we know transportation makes the city go, and we need to do a better job. And the reality is that there's some maps out here now. There are a lot of places where everybody from everything except in Bellevue could run through around the lake. We can't get through Bellevue. It's not connected there. We can't get from here to Redmond right now, even without having bikes on that. So there are a lot of things that we can do, and getting the other road over by the other roads we've been talking about. We need to do all this. So I'm really excited about this. Yes, it's a huge thing, but Bellevue going forward with all the other plans we're doing, all the other things we're putting in place, we're going to need more and better roads. And so I think we've got plans out here.
Are we talking about car roads?
Huh?
Are we talking about
I'm
car
talking
roads?
about car roads
Okay.
and bike. Well, I'm just saying, bike, and in that we can build, as you mentioned, at that time, we have new roads coming up. We have bike roads we can put in place, but we need to have biking on the side of the roads, and we need to plan that. So there's a lot of things like this. I'm just saying that we have the capability and the possibility to really make this whole thing work. So I'm very excited about the direction here, request for direction from council with these issues going forward, and then the commission works over that, and we come back and work with the community all along. I'm very positive and very excited about this now.
Okay, and I heard you emphasize safety first. That's nice. Thank you. Councilmember Zahn.
Yes, thank you. I too appreciate all of the feedback and comments because, when we get feedback, it helps us to consider all of the different aspects of issues. And Bellevue prides itself on public safety. And safety on our roads is as much a public safety concern as the other aspects that we look at. And we committed to Vision Zero 8 years ago as a city and developed the high injury network map so we could see where the areas were that the vulnerable road users, which are the bicyclists, are the most vulnerable. We have a dashboard that shows what some of that data looks like. And as I think some of the comments earlier, we've waited 15 years to have 2 north-south and 2 east-west connected corridors. I remember I was working on this when I was on the Transportation Commission, right, and recognizing that we had not met those commitments that we had made about that. And then in 2020, we committed to a safe system approach where a big part of what we've been doing the last couple of years is actually pursuing US DOT grants for safety on our roads. And, you know, as part of the National League of Cities, I was giving some feedback to US DOT about the grant that we received. So I had a chance to look at the grant information. And the $2.7 million grant that we just got actually includes a map that shows the high injury network and our bike network. So I'm really trying to understand if we're going to reevaluate these corridors, but we've actually already published information that we're pursuing grant funding in. Does that create any issues for us if we now decide that these aren't the corridors that we want to pursue? So that is one question that I would like to better understand. And then for D, corridors that are deferred, what's the expect project timeline for those? Because we've already been waiting 15 years. So if we put projects into that category, I'd like to better understand what kind of timeline that would look like. And I think it would also be helpful for us to be reminded that there have been 3 different roads where we repurposed a lane in discrete segments, and it's been that way for several years. So are we finding more issues related to travel time in those 3 areas? And I think one of the things I'd really like to understand is how much of a delay would we find to be acceptable if we're actually creating better safety on our roads? So I think that that is an interesting discussion we should be having about when we're balancing travel time against safety on our roads. That seems like a very interesting discussion of interest and trade-offs for us to have. So with that said, here are the things I've been thinking about as I've been listening to my colleagues. One, I like the deputy mayor's comment about the just do it. So for those corridors that don't require repurposing, why would we still be talking about this? We should just be doing that, and I agree. However, I believe that when we implement, I believe that what the mayor brought up is equally important, which is that if we're going to be doing any data collection, but the actual corridor is not connected and safe, the data is meaningless. We are not actually going to have the kind of usage that we need. You know, my wrist still hurts a little bit from riding yesterday because I was riding with the group on Bellevue Way. I am the interested yet concerned bike rider. I was gripping those handlebars so tight that when I got home last night, my wrist literally ached. And, you know, I think about then, if we're not creating the kind of safe spaces, are we actually going to create more risk for people that use it, or that they will just avoid it? And I think that would, there's a lot of businesses and economic development opportunity along multiple corridors of these. And so that's one of the things I was thinking about is maybe to add on to Deputy Mayor and the Mayor that I like taking it off because we should just be doing it. However, I think we need to really understand how we make sure that we don't leave a gap, that it truly is a connected corridor. And then I think the other part of this is when I think about the long-term solution of Spring District and widening roadways in the adjacent areas, that's a long-term solution. You know, what are we talking about, 10-plus years? I really believe that these are supposed to be rapid implementation for the high-injury networks and public and transportation safety. So we should be willing to pilot these pieces of creating that connected corridor and see how it works, and absolutely collect the data. Many cities around the country have already implemented this. They have data themselves. We have some data ourselves on our roads. And so that's what I've been thinking about. And I see that there's an E, which is corridors that would no longer be considered. I would be really concerned about removing any corridors that has any high injury, part of our high injury network. I mean, if it is a corridor that doesn't have any safety issues or whatnot, that is different than corridors that are on our high injury network. I just would have a hard time thinking about transportation safety and taking corridors off that have injuries. So I guess there was one, actually I had two more comments. Thank you for indulging me. This is only in this one particular area, and I just want to make sure when we talk about truly connected north-south and east-west corridors, that if we take a lens out and look at holistically Bellevue, that these routes actually connect all the way through the city, because if we're only shining a light in this one area, but the corridor doesn't extend all the way north, south, and east, west, we haven't actually created that connected corridor. And then lastly, I would like to better understand, because you talked about input from the fire department, and having just come from Fire Ops 101, they have a really hard job, and we would definitely want to make sure that we get their feedback about how these things work. Thanks.
Can I get some clarification from something you said? You talked about routes that have high injury data that shows, isn't it possible that we're having a lot of injuries because of poor infrastructure? And then maybe we need to be focusing on those areas rather than taking them out of the plan?
Oh, correct. Let me rephrase what I was
Okay.
trying to say. What I'm trying to say is that I would not want to leave in E that just says corridors that would no longer be considered, because if it's a high injury network corridor, I don't think we should be taking it out. I think it absolutely needs to be part of the consideration. So E, if it stays in, needs to be reworded so that we don't, that even if it's hard to do, because if it's a high injury network, we need to lean in and not take it out. Does that make sense? Okay, thanks.
I mean, part of me thinks that it's just more of a priority thing. You know, that some things will be at the bottom of the list and some things will be at the top of the list, but I can't see just taking things out for the rest of the city's life. Of course, you can always review your ped bike plan at some point.
And then it gets back to the issue of permanent infrastructure that we should be looking at doing as well.
Yes, I agree. That would not necessarily fall under this plan, is that what you're saying?
Well, I mean, with the limited amount of money, you can't do absolutely everything. I think that's what that comment E was getting back to. Doesn't mean that it's not important, but it could mean, or in the case of Bell Red Road, what are we going to do to advance Spring Boulevard? Because that creates that connection as well.
Okay, I gotcha.
May I ask a follow-up?
Yes.
Thank you. You mentioned there have been lots of comments that provided to you that talks about alternative direction that you thought they are very interesting. Is that correct? Did you say something like that?
Can you rephrase the question?
You said you have received some great comments that show some interesting alternative routes. Is that correct? Did I hear that correctly?
Yeah, we got a lot of comments, a lot of really, good segments that we could be looking at, a lot of really good information coming out of the process. And I think that the Transportation Commission is a good venue to evaluate.
So that's exactly what my point is. Yesterday, I think we received an email that I think from maybe Maria Frost that shows a very nice map that basically connect everything that we are talking about. It was all blue. I haven't done the dive deep, but that map was showing that. Has you guys received that? Have you studied that? Is that a feasible option without repurposing any road, but have a very connected bike path that we are addressing?
Take that.
Sure. We are aware of the map, and we have met with Maria Frost and Kevin Wallace, well, Kevin Wallace specifically, and I think Maria Frost perhaps in a separate meeting. And so we're aware of it. We are taking a look at the ideas that have been shared through that. It's early days because we just received the information maybe a week or so before you all did. But I don't think I'm going out on a limb to say that this is some additional information that we would want our Transportation Commission to take a look at. Oh, and I will say that some of the things that are on the map, I can very pleased to report we are looking at already. And we have ideas around. There are permanent infrastructure. They're not taking away travel lanes. They're not of the rapid implementation nature. So there's a lot of possibilities here for thinking more broadly, deeply, differently about how we can move forward. That isn't necessarily rapid implementation that we remove travel lanes. Because what that plan does is say, let's not remove any travel lanes at all. So that's really what it's focused on. It's not focusing on low-cost rapid implementation necessarily. It's focusing on the bigger conversation of the durable permanent infrastructure and how we can arrive at that.
Thank you so much. Thank you all of stakeholders for spending all of this time to create those alternative routes, but thank you so much for considering them and providing them to the Transportation Commission for further study and analysis.
We offered Kevin Wallace an internship, but we can't afford him, I understand. So,
Is he doing a good job?
he did a brilliant job.
Good.
Thesis level.
I'm going to say something, then I'm going to have call on you. So what I'm hearing, and I just want to see if I'm being accurate here, is A, the prioritization of non-travel lane repurposing projects, and then corridors that would repurpose vehicle travel lane, that we would get a lot of data on that before we did something like that. And then the corridors, everything else as you've written, and then E, corridors that would no longer be considered because, not because they've dropped off, because we can do them in a different plan or something.
Right.
Yeah.
Something we've talked about is the rationale for each of these corridors and why a corridor will go into one category or another.
Yeah.
And this is a good example of where we would want to provide the rationale for why it's not going to be considered because of the following.
In this program, right,
Yep.
exactly.
Yep.
Okay, yes.
Just two things. One, I really appreciate the constant request for good data. It's really important. And in fact, last Transportation Commission meeting, we actually updated that. I want to clarify that will also cover Bike Bellevue, but we did make, I thought, an important decision that the way we're going to track data in terms of capacity, throughput, excess capacity, et cetera, is based on peak hours. Mm-hmm. And that carries over to anything related to Bike Bellevue as well, correct? Correct. Andrew? Is that correct? Okay, good. I want to make sure. I know we got Kevin on the line because he was there, so just in case he needs to weigh in. But that's an important thing, and I know we've heard from a lot of people making sure we're getting the right data and we're consistent with that data across everything that we do. The other thing I was going to suggest, in the spirit of giving really clear direction to the Transportation Commission, is that we amend principle number 4, because I've heard it here a couple of different times about the concern about the arterial lanes or vehicular lanes. So I'd like to amend that Bike Bellevue principle number 4, and I'm happy to read that amendment if we're ready. Quote, use a data-informed approach to evaluate impacts to all modes of travel and design the program to maximize the mobility of all modes through improvements to the bicycle network that do not remove general purpose vehicular lanes.
I don't know, well, is there a second to that?
I second.
Okay. I don't know that I want to just take out that you can never remove a vehicle lane, just carte blanche. I think that's something that should be really considered and, you know, have a really good reason for doing it, using data, using a pilot project. So I'm not comfortable with that part of everything else I agreed with. Go ahead, Councilmember Zahn.
I agree with you, Mayor. I think that we've already shown that we've done that 3 different places discreetly, so the idea we're gonna categorically put that in, I don't support.
Yes.
I'd like to add that I appreciate the Deputy Mayor's comment about this map that was presented by Mary Frost. That's a alternative, that we're looking at that addresses my concern about not taking away vehicle lanes. So if that is a alternative we heard, why can't we address it, look at it, for the commission to even look at it? And so I would, if that's the case, I'd be happy to reconsider my second of Councilmember Jarrett's motion. Otherwise, that would be a opportunity, a way to get us to look at, the other alternatives.
We will be evaluating. It was public input that we got from, not only from Maria, but from also Kevin Wallace and others as well.
Yes.
So that would be part of the evaluation process going forward. And the Transportation Commission is a good place to do that.
Okay.
So we have a motion on the table. Is there,
Can I say something?
yes, you can.
I completely agree that if possible, removing traffic road lane should be our last approach, especially in Bellevue. Again, the amount of density that we are bringing there, again, these are all capacity, but I don't even know how our current road capacity will manage that density. And again, I understand that some of the density can carry by the bike, but I don't think the math works completely. So I agree that removing a road lane should be our last resort. And I think if Maria Frost or Kevin Wallace map works, definitely we should go with that. But I also agree with Mayor and Councilmember Zahn that I don't want we just completely remove that option. Maybe not for Bellevue, but for maybe a place like 108 that we just did and there was no impact or there was minimal impact. For that option, I don't think we should completely carte blanche remove it. But again, that should be our last resort, especially when we are increasing our density like crazy.
Councilmember Hamilton.
I'd like a little clarification. So is the motion here to change the principles permanently going forward then?
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess, I think it is time to take removing travel lanes just out of the discussion. It's a huge impediment to moving forward. We have $4.5 million to spend. You can get through this project list here very quickly. So, I think the Transportation Commission has got to look at what's available and then look at what we can do. So you could choose one of the high-priced items and a couple of small-priced items. That's the end of it. I think that this discussion around removing travel lanes for where we are right now is just getting in the way. So I certainly agree that in the short term, we should not be considering removing travel lanes. I can't imagine ever thinking it's a good idea, but I guess I wouldn't be in favor of changing the overall principles ongoing. But it doesn't serve us now to keep having this conversation. It keeps everybody on defense. It's high time we get on offense. There's a lot we can do, and there's a lot of support for moving forward. So I certainly agree in the short term, but not making a permanent change.
So on this motion, can we take a vote on this motion? Do you need to speak to it, or can we just take a vote?
Yeah, I'm not sure what this conversation just said is doing on this.
Okay.
I'll vote for this. I do think that, well,
Okay.
it's not clear. That's
Have
what
you
I'm-
heard the motion? Do you want to repeat the motion?
This is it?
No.
What,
So
to do what? Take it
Jared
out?
has,
Yes.
Councilmember Neuenhuis has made a motion to change the Bike Bellevue Principle number 4. And so can you read it again?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's just the latter part of it. Use a data-informed approach to evaluate impacts to all modes of travel and design the program to maximize the mobility of all modes through improvements to the bicycle network that do not remove general-purpose vehicular lanes.
Well, I have a
And so-
problem because I think that throughout this country, in many places, this has been done in a very successful way. So,
Yeah.
you know,
So,
this is not.
I think
as-
we've
Yeah.
discussed this.
Okay,
So,
well.
all in favor of the motion to change the principle number 4, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Yay.
Okay, I don't think that passes. I think that's 5-2. So let's go back to the criteria, the A, B, C, D, E. Okay, so I wonder if what I'm hearing from the council that is not mentioned in here, and I'm wondering if there would be a motion to do this, to put F, an emphasis on creating connected routes. Is there a motion or no?
Actually, I would put that as A.
I make a motion to add an option, can be A, that has that wording that you mentioned.
Emphasis on creating connected routes.
Emphasis on creating connected route for Bike Bellevue.
Okay. I think everybody has mentioned that as a value, so I thought we should put it in writing.
I need a clarification.
Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I agree that they need to be south-east, north-south connection, east-west connection. But when you say connected route, doesn't mean it has to be the same street or somehow it connects. I agree, you need to somehow connect.
Right.
But there's a question about what does it mean by connected route?
Well, what it
Has to be the
doesn't
same
mean-
street going straight through?
What it doesn't mean is having a big gap in your bicycle
I agree,
infrastructure that puts you at
But
risk.
how to connect it, that's the detail.
That's
That's
up
what
to
I'm
the-
concerned about.
That's up to the experts.
Well, that's why
There's
the
no-
devil is in detail.
Confines as to
Okay.
how it's done.
So you heard what I was saying, right? That doesn't mean that it has to be that way.
Well,
Could be
actually,
connected. Okay, I agree. If that's the case, I'm happy with it.
All right. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. So I feel like we have a consensus. I offered changes to B, and I wonder if there is a motion that on B, we include use of data, including use of data, just to put that in there, even though that's a guiding principle. So if you're going to look at repurposing a travel lane, that you use data to do that, does that make sense, putting that in there? Letters, emails?
I don't think.
Is there a motion? You say so moved.
Mayor, can I suggest that for B, then we add as a last resort, as we've described
I agree
here?
with that.
Yeah, okay.
I don't know what the sentencing looks like, but I think that would be a great emphasis for the Transportation Commission to know what are the direction from council is.
Exactly.
Well, I was trying to make a motion to put in use of data. And can we do that first and see if anybody wants to do that one?
So moved.
Okay, so all those in
Oh,
favor,
hold on.
okay, go
Can
ahead.
you clarify, when you say use of data, what you mean?
Yeah.
That if we're going to repurpose a vehicle travel lane and will be first evaluated as a trial or demonstration project using criteria and data that will be developed by the Transportation Commission. Or criteria that will be developed by the Transportation Commission and data that will be provided, I don't know.
But accurate data.
Accurate data.
Okay, data's fine.
That will be used to inform the decision. That's the
Okay.
clarification.
Yeah.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, now to Councilman Neuenhuis.
Thank you. I also wanted to add on to B to say that, I'm not sure where we want to put it here, but to only repurpose a vehicle travel lane as a last resort and would first be evaluated as a trial or demonstration project using criteria.
works.
Does that work? Okay?
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Nay. Okay,
And now both sides will get.
and then, let's see, E.
That's fine.
Okay, and then I'd like to know if we could get a motion for E that includes with a rationale of why not on that list. I don't know, you can make that more technical.
So moved.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion on that? All in favor?
So,
Yeah.
so that was the one where, you know, I wanted to make sure that if there's a corridor on a high-injury network, that we wouldn't be triggering E saying we're not gonna consider it, because I do think the high-injury network.
Well, then that would be another priority that would say that you're going to prioritize high-injury networks.
Okay, then.
Let's
I
do that
will-
after.
I will do that after.
Okay. All in favor of including a rationale of why not on that list, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay. And then Councilmember Zahn, you are suggesting that we add a G, which says an emphasis on,
High-injury network. Corridors.
okay, you move that.
Yes, I would make that
Is
motion.
there a second?
What is it?
Go ahead.
High what?
High-injury
That we are
corridors.
prioritizing high-injury network corridors because it's consistent with how we focus on transportation safety and Vision Zero. So we made the commitment for Vision Zero by 2030. We've been pursuing federal funding based on that. And so it's grounded in evaluating improvements in the high-injury network.
Okay, is there a second? Hold on. Did somebody second?
I
her
did
motion?
second.
Okay.
So maybe staff could explain, because we have a high-injury network map.
And Bike Bellevue is basically the high injury network area. Everything in it is part of
By
it.
and large. By and large, the corridors that are up for consideration are the high injury network corridors, the arterials within the community. There are some isolated situations where that's not the case, but basically, it's by and large, it's there. It wouldn't cause any harm, though, to do what you're suggesting.
Well, and I
Just to
think when
provide
we're
clarity.
asking you to consider other ideas that haven't been mentioned, like Southeast Eighth, you know, maybe you haven't had a lot of injuries there, but we're asking you to include that. I think Councilmember Zahn's asking you to prioritize the high injury ones. Am I right?
Yep.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. So it looks like we have gone from A to E to A to G, and with some modifications. And so,
Mayor, do you still considering to remove A as just do it instead of just go back to the Transportation Commission?
oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize it didn't say that. And implement as soon as possible. How do you want to say that? That it just goes to, it doesn't have to go back to the Transportation Commission, that it actually just happens? How, does that not say that? How, do we need to specify that?
You'd be directing staff to go ahead and do it for
Right.
A.
Does it need to be worded any differently than it already is?
Well, the one thing is that currently it's nested under the set of recommendations that the commission would develop.
Oh,
So
right.
it's the idea is taking it out of that.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's right. Okay. So those would be taken out to be given to staff
So
to implement.
maybe just add that to A.
Well, but what you're saying is that we are giving guidance to the Transportation Commission to not worry about these, to just have staff do it without.
Yep.
Is there a cleaner way to do this?
Yeah, I would like to ask, thank you, Mayor. I would like to ask Andrew if it would be important to have the Transportation Commission maybe get this direction from the council that you'd like to move those quickly, but to have them and staff spend a little more time making sure that you've got the right projects that you would want to move fast. So just send it to them, but with the guidance and direction that they should be moved quickly, but to allow the Transportation Commission and the staff to still continue to take all of this guidance in mind as you are pulling out some for quick implementation.
Yep, that makes sense.
Or without further discussion? How about that? Just implement, that the Transportation Commission implements this without further discussion? Oh, yes.
So I would be concerned about taking that out. If we're looking at a pot of money that we
Yeah.
are going to allocate, I would hate to see us move these kinds of projects over to staff that decreases the amount of money that's left in that pot,
Oh, I don't think it,
right? We have $4.5 million to spend on these projects, and
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to see us consider those. I would love to see those come back as a part of the list and as a part of the prioritization and
I think all
deciding.
that he's saying is that doesn't have to spend time with it would go to direct funding.
So then that would decrease that $4.5 million pot of money so that the Transportation Commission would be looking at a smaller pot.
Yep.
I think what you are saying is correct, because if you're looking at alternative route, maybe they are not even considered in the alternative route, that's what you're saying, and maybe the prioritization is going to be a completely new prioritization based on the new route, maybe? That's what your concern is?
Well, and I think we'd be eliminating, certain corridors automatically if we reduce that pot of money by whatever this amount is that would be represented in category A here.
Completely see your point. The reason I said those, I think can you mention what corridors we are talking about? Because I think that makes some clarity in the conversation.
Yeah, it's the Lake Washington Boulevard is one of them, and 100th Avenue
If you have
is.
the map by any chance, can you show it on the map, or it's going to be super hard?
Yeah, let's do
Because I think if we see that, maybe we know that those are all inevitable corridors and we should do them. So if we can do them faster, do them.
I'm going to say something. We've already kind of made some priorities on doing connected routes. And so if this is not a part of a connected route, maybe we don't want to just have them do it.
Yeah.
Maybe we want them to.
That's why I'm saying if they show that to us, we can maybe see what they are, or we can just put
I
them on the
think we should
transportation.
just leave it the way it is, to be honest with you.
Sounds good to me.
Councilmember Zahn.
Yeah, I guess I would just say that, I understand we have the 4.5 million right now. We're gonna be going into our budget workshop in April. And I think we should be willing to, especially since this is about transportation safety, as we look at how much funding we have and revenue coming in, if we actually find that there are more corridors that are connected and fits the criteria, I think we should be considering whether we put a little bit more money in the pot to get more of these projects done. So I wouldn't confine the Transportation Commission to only picking these projects to hit the limit of the 4.5. So I would just ask my colleagues to consider that when we get to the budget workshop.
So I think that,
Because I don't see putting it in here right now, here, I agree.
I think Deputy Mayor, you're okay with it
Yes.
as it is.
Yes.
Okay, so we now just need to vote on direction of what we just all described. So is there, yes, Councilmember Hamilton?
I would love to see something come back from Transportation Commission that would show a connected network that does not take away any travel lanes. I would like to have that as an option. And if that's not included in here, I would like that to be something that they come back to us with.
I agree. I second.
I don't know what to do with that.
No, but could, if we came up with, find out that you actually can do that
I mean,
safely?
we already
how do
have
we do it?
prioritizing projects that don't repurpose vehicle
Right.
travel. So
Okay,
we've already
I
got
think if
that.
it's included, that's great. I'm just really encouraged by the fact that within the last few days, including tonight, we've gotten options that, get us a long ways
Right.
down the path without taking any travel lanes, and I would love to see that come back. So if that can come back in whichever way, that would be great.
Yeah.
I feel like that's covered on
Okay.
B.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
You
so,
want this motion?
are we ready to vote?
We are ready to make a
Well,
motion.
I thought we did that.
We voted on the individual amendments to,
Okay.
or to these, and now
Okay.
we're gonna vote as the group. And we now have G, E, F, G, F and G added, anyway, I think you all know. So, you want
Yeah,
to make
let
the
me just-
motion?
If you can give me that back, I can maybe,
You know what, I bet you can read it back to us.
with all
No?
the changes.
Okay. Okay. I think I've got it.
If I can read your handwriting.
B includes use of data.
Data.
E with the rationale, why not on this list. F with an emphasis on creating connected routes. And G prioritizing high accident routes.
I do my best, bear with me.
Excuse me, just for a sec. Diane, did you have this? Help us out.
Oh,
Help.
perfect.
Have it all recorded, but go ahead and.
No, if
Well,
you have it, I
repeat
don't
it.
want it to do it.
Can you,
after.
can you read it to us so that we can make sure we have it right and then you can say it?
Sure, so I have add to B, use of data. Add to option B, removing lanes as a last resort. Add to E, rationale of why something would be recommended to be removed. Add G, an emphasis on high injury network corridors. And I missed one. Did I miss F?
Emphasis on.
Emphasis on creating connected routes, F.
Great.
And G prioritizing high accident routes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Did you say that? Sorry. Okay.
So I move to direct the Transportation Commission to develop a recommendation for each Bike Bellevue corridor consistent with categories that our interim city manager mentioned in the agenda memo.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Declare that passes. All right, I have a little bit of an announcement, and I want to thank you all for the excellent discussion here tonight and for the community for all their input. So April 1st, regular meeting of our city council is canceled, and the council will be holding a special meeting on April 8th to review the city's financial strategy in a workshop session. And then the council voted to move our regular meetings from Monday evenings to Tuesday evenings. And this change will begin with our first Tuesday regular meeting on April 16th here in council chambers. So we will see you then. And with that, our meeting's adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.